Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the Young Thinkers Conference, jointly organized by the British Deputy High Commission Mumbai with MIT School of Government, Pune. Before beginning the function, let us all invite all the dignitaries and esteemed guests over to the dais with a huge round of applause. Let us first invite Mr. Richard Barlow, Political and Bilateral Affairs, British High Commission, New Delhi, over to the dais. Let us also welcome with a huge round of applause Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, General Secretary, FDR, and founder Lok Sabha Party, over to the dais. Let us also welcome with a huge round of applause Dr. S.S. Haridas, Associate Director, MIT School of Government, MIT WPO, Pune. We are going to start with the inaugural function. MIT World Peace University is one of the top education institutions in India, founded by the eminent educationist, Professor Dr. Vishwanath D. Karad, which imparts a holistic and value-based education for the promotion of a universal culture of peace and welfare among the youth. MIT Group has around 40 years of legacy in education, which is now spread across India with 10 campuses, 3 universities, 65 plus courses, and more than 50,000 students. MIT School of Government, which was started in the year 2005, is the first institute of its kind in India and Asia, established by our Executive President of MIT Group of Institutions, Sri Rahul V. Karad, which imparts training for political leadership. About the conference, artificial intelligence has always been a subject of interest to scientists, philosophers, and artists. Theories and mathematics behind artificial intelligence have existed for around 60 years. In India per se, the government and individuals have in recent years also seen the use of artificial intelligence in various facets: digital assistants, cab aggregators, biometric recognition, targeted advertisements, and online recommendation engines are among the most common uses of AI. The success of AI, though, cannot be taken for granted. Several reports show that there are a number of challenges for the success of AI: talent, data availability, privacy and confidentiality, cost of implementation, etc., goes among few of them. The advent of big data, simulation, neural networking, algorithm decision making, etc., have now ensured that AI is here to stay. Set up in a blossoming liberal arts milieu, this conference is then rightly aimed at engaging the next generation audience that shall be squarely facing AI challenges in their upcoming future. The conference will take stock of the scope and challenges posed by AI and catalyze a healthy public discourse intended to navigating such challenges. We at MIT World Peace University have always followed the culture of starting any good initiative, invoking God's blessings with the World Peace Prayer formulated by our founder Sri Vishwanath D. Karad, which stands for secularism, tolerance, and world peace. I request all of you to rise for the World Peace Prayer, and I also request our technical team to play the World Peace Prayer.
नमो जियाद्या वेद प्रतिपाद्या जय जय स्वसंवेद्या आत्मरूपा देवातुति गणेषु सकलार्थमति प्रकाशु मणे निवृत्तिदासु अवधारि बोधि गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Thank you all. Let us begin the inaugural function. For the opening remarks, may I invite Dr. S.S. Haridas, Associate Director, MIT School of Government, who's one of the strongest pillars of SOG and whose guiding spirit makes us all work towards excellence. Ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Anuradha. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed my great pleasure to welcome all of you for this Young Thinkers Conference. The name itself shows that we all are young enough to think, and all youngsters should think. So we need to think about what? We need to think about something which will change the society in the future. We all are the change agents for the society. And being the change agents for the society, let's be a part of the change. It's always well said that the people, those who accept the change, they are the leaders. The people, those who forecast the change, they are the change makers for the society. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a time for all of us to be the change makers for the society, and we should be in the forefront to lead the change which is going to happen. So once we think about artificial intelligence, yes, we all know that this is there and it will stay forever. And the time which has come today so that we all will understand what it is, how it is, and how best we can adopt this, and how best we can change the society which is going to be changed anyhow. That's what the conference all about as such. I'm feeling very happy for delivering this welcome remarks on behalf of MIT World Peace University, MIT School of Government in particular. This MIT World Peace University, it was established in the year 1983 by Professor Vishwanath Karad, who is an educationist. He was a professor of College of Engineering, which is one of the famous college in Pune. He wrote one open letter in the newspaper saying that there is a requirement for the private engineering colleges in Maharashtra. It was there in Andhra and Karnataka earlier, but it was not there in Maharashtra. So he wrote one open letter, and the education minister at that particular time, he called him for the discussion and said, why don't you start? So he came back, and few like-minded professors, they came together and they have established this particular trust. They have established this particular university. So the beauty here is we all are academicians. We all are pure teachers. Those are running the institution, we are pure teachers. We established this MIT School of Government in the year 2005. Professor Rahul Karad, who is an alumni of Harvard and Cardiff too, he saw School of Government, Kennedy School of Government in the West. So he had a dream of establishing something like that in the East. So we are the first one to establish the School of Government, where our core is electoral politics. My students, those who come here for 2 years of their master's program, they learn each and everything which is required to contest the elections or to have the sustainable life in Delhi. That's how entire 2 years of program is. The program is sorry for my bad throat today. It's developed over a period of time. Late Shri T.N. Sheshan, he was our first academic mentor. And I'm so happy that Professor JP is here, who is our academic council member. So all these people, they have guided us to develop the curriculum as far as the School of Government is considered. This conference we thought of hosting about this conference almost 3 months before, where Mr. Sachin, he's the one who took this particular lead and we started working together. And I'm so happy that this conference has come up today with many interesting topics where we talk about the international relations, autonomy, inclusion, and security. We also have skilling in the age of artificial intelligence. We'll be also discussing about artificial intelligence and ethics, which is very, very important as such. Where we're also going to talk about the security, the responsibility, accountability, all these are the aspects. We'll also be speaking about artificial intelligence to moderate the online content. Now, how good it is, how bad it is. So when once we are going to opt for one good thing, we usually have some bad things about it also. So how best we minimize all these problems or the challenges, and how best we think about the advantages of this something is the crux of the conference, which we are going to have it for the entire day. I'm sure for all the people those are attending this conference, it will be a feast, because all the members, those will be speaking here or those are a part of the panel members, they all are the great experts in this particular area. I'm really curious to know a lot of things about artificial intelligence, and we're going to open it for the question answer session too. So ladies and gentlemen, please be ready with all your questions. Be inquisitive to ask the questions. We'll be passing the mic to each one of you. You just introduce yourself and then you ask a lot of questions. For all the panel members, those are sitting here, and as far as our guest for the inaugural session and the keynote address, Professor Jay Prakash Narayan will be delivering today. So all these people, they have come from outside. They have registered. They have the interest in artificial intelligence. That's the reason they have registered on our website, and that's the reason they are here as such. We also have few students from our university, but again, even the students of the university, they are the one, those are interested in artificial intelligence. So because you are here, you have taken the interest in artificial intelligence, the subject artificial intelligence, it implies that you are very, very inquisitive about what is bound to happen in the society. Now, that itself is a great thing for all of us as such. My heartful welcome to each one of you, those are here. And thanks a lot for taking out the time to as such. We'll be starting the keynote address in a very short while after this inauguration formalities as such. And I repeat again, please be ready with your questions so that we all can answer to the best of our abilities as such. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Jai Hind.
Thank you, ma'am. Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. Let the darkness in our minds and in our hearts go away by the enlightenment or the knowledge which the lamp gives. Next, we have the lighting of the lamp ceremony. I request all the dignitaries to move over to the lamp. I also request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. N.T. Rao, and also Mr. Paul Carter, Deputy Head of Mission, British Deputy High Commission, Mumbai, to come over to the dais for the lighting of the lamp ceremony. I also request Group Captain D.P. Apte, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of MIT World Peace University, to come over to the dais to light the lamp. Thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next, may I now invite Mr. Richard Barlow, Political and Bilateral Affairs, British High Commission, New Delhi, for the welcome address. Mr. Richard Barlow is head of the Political and Bilateral Affairs at the British High Commission, New Delhi. He arrived in India in September 2018. He's a historian who has studied Indian history at bachelor, master's, and postgraduate level. A UK career diplomat who joined the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 2000. He speaks Spanish, Portuguese, and has a working knowledge of Hindi. That's great, sir. We welcome you for the welcome address.
बहुत धन्यवाद और नमस्कार देवियों और सज्जनों। जब मैं भारत में पहुंचा था 2018 में, तब मैं पहले वाराणसी में गया. And I spent a few weeks in Varanasi learning Hindi. And one day I went out to a village and we visited some government schools. It must have been 7th or 8th grade. Dr. Narayan and I were just talking about education. And I thought, I'll look in the school textbooks and I'll see what Indian children are being taught about Great Britain. So I picked up a book and I started to flick through it. And I found a chapter on 1857 की क्रांति. And I thought, okay, here we go, 1857. And then a bit later on, I found a chapter about Stephen Hawking, a whole chapter about Stephen Hawking, his life in Cambridge, his work, his studies, and his disabilities. And I was really pleased to see that modern Indian children are also being taught about other things regarding my country than just the history. And that's the link with artificial intelligence, of course. Because in January 2015, Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk and many other AI experts wrote an open letter on artificial intelligence. Maybe some of you have read this letter. And they said that AI had already yielded remarkable successes in tasks such as speech recognition. I guess you'd expect Stephen Hawking to talk about speech recognition. Image classification, autonomous vehicles, machine translation, and question answering systems. Because of the great potential of AI, this letter went on, it is important to research how to reap its benefits whilst avoiding potential pitfalls. And that is exactly what our conversation here is about today. Exploring together how AI will continue to change our societies. All the positive things that AI will bring to us and the risks. And we're already living with AI around us. Alexa in the living rooms, connected kitchens and homes. Last week, I went to Britain with 6 Indian MPs. We went with an MP from Maharashtra, from the Rajya Sabha. And we went to University College Teaching Hospital at King's Cross. And the director of the hospital explained that now when we submit ourselves for medical tests, machine learning means that we can be tested automatically for many other ailments at the same time. And the coming years are going to bring massive transformations and advances for AI, transforming lives from language translation to helping find distant planets. But will we as humans always understand how these systems work? Will advances like facial recognition technology always be used for benign purposes? I suspect not. Will new technology give us helpful robots or pink-eyed terminators sent back from the future to cull the human race? Who said that? Who talked about pink-eyed terminators? Do any of you remember that? That was Prime Minister Boris Johnson on the 27th of September 2019 in the United Nations General Assembly. Check out his speech. And somehow we're going to have to regulate these new technologies. Who will be at fault if you 3D print a product and it causes you harm? Whose fault will that be? How can we prevent algorithms from being biased against certain groups? Will cities that weren't ready for Uber be ready for urban taxis? Have any of you seen the film Blade Runner 2? Great urban taxis in Blade Runner 2. These are regulatory challenges that cross jurisdictional boundaries and can't be addressed by existing rules. So I am delighted that we're here today to talk about these big questions. You are all part of the British High Commission's flagship youth conference program, our YTCs, that have provided a platform for some of the best and brightest minds across India to challenge wisdom, to help us bring discussions on vital topics like AI. And we've engaged with youth across India, taking Brand YTC to Chandigarh, to Kolkata, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, Shillong, Vadodara. And this is our second edition of the YTCs in the Western region, arranged by our Deputy High Commissioner in Mumbai. The first was in Mumbai, so this is the first one outside Mumbai. And you are the future of your country. You will be some of India's best minds and talent in the future. We want to hear your views. We want to make connections between the UK and India. And we are proud of the UK's strengths in science and technology, including AI. And we've seen investments in my country across all sectors. But I think that fintech and health tech have seen particularly strong growth in the UK. And to ensure AI benefits everyone in the UK, the British government has established a Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation to advise on the ethical use of data, including for AI. And the UK will be hosting a summit in London later this year to try and agree some common set of global principles to shape the norms and standards that will guide the development of emerging technology. So there we are, the UK showing new leadership as we enter a new phase of our nation's story here in January 2020. I'd like to finish with the words of Prime Minister Boris Johnson at the UN General Assembly in September. Together we can vanquish killer diseases, eliminate famine, protect the environment, transform our cities. Success will depend, now as ever, on freedom, openness, and pluralism. The formula that not only emancipates the human spirit, but releases the boundless ingenuity and inventiveness of mankind. And ladies and gentlemen, in India, there is boundless ingenuity and inventiveness. So let it flow today. Good luck. Shubhkamnayi.
Thank you so much, sir. That Hindi was excellent. Atiti Devo Bhava. World Peace University has been renowned for treating their guests as par with God. And next, today is also no exception. Next, we'll felicitate all our dignitaries on the dais. I request Mr. Richard Barlow to felicitate Dr. Jaiprakash Narayan, General Secretary, FDR, and founder, Lok Sabha Party. World Peace Dome. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. There is a small announcement. Our Twitter handle, #YTC India, is now live, and you can also tweet. It is the whole program is also going live and is being seen by all over India and the world. Next is the screening of the School of Government and the Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad film and the World Peace Dome film. I request our technical team to play the SOG BCS film and also the World Peace Dome film.
India, one of the biggest democracies in the world. A country which is known for its unique structure of unity in diversity. And most importantly, it is a land of youth. India has got the largest amounts of youngsters in the world. This youth stands for radiance, energy, and innovation. For last 2 decades or so, the nation is gaining strength and experiencing positive changes on many crucial fronts: economic, educational, social, and cultural. What if this flow of youth energy is diverted and focused upon the political revolution in the country? You bet the rest would be history. Realizing the responsibility thrust upon our generation, Rahul Karar, the executive president of MIT World Peace University, conceived the idea of imparting education and training in politics and governance to the youth as early as in 2005, when he founded MIT School of Government, Pune, India. MIT School of Government is the first and only school in India and Asia to conduct a program to train the educated youth of India for a career in politics. Nearly 350 alumni of MIT School of Government are now associated with different political parties of India in various capacities. In order to invite participation of more and more youth in the political process of the country, Shri Rahul V. Karar conceived a new thought in 2011. Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, or Indian Students' Parliament. It brought together student leaders from different universities across the country on a single common platform to voice their opinions and make their voices heard across the length and breadth of the country. Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad is Asia's largest classroom with over 10,000 student leaders who learn from the eminent personalities from different fields, who guide them on how they can participate in developing a better country. For 3 days, the students are exposed to enriching life-sharing experiences of the icons that have made it big in their respective vocations.
जिस धैर्य के साथ आप सुबह से बैठे हैं, मुझे यकीन है कि इस 9वें छात्र संसद से निकले लड़के लड़कियां, हमारे युवा मित्र भारत की नई तकदीर लिखेंगे।
मिट्टी में मिला दे, मैं जुदा हो नहीं सकता, अब इससे ज्यादा मैं तेरा हो नहीं सकता। बस तू मेरी आवाज से आवाज मिला दे, फिर देख के इस देश में क्या हो नहीं सकता।
युवा शक्ति में जागरूक होना जरूरी है। अगर वो जाग गया तो कल का भविष्य दूर नहीं है। भारत माता की वंदे वंदे इंकलाब।
सुर में अखियों में मुन्ना मुन्ना somewhere it was there and it came into my mind and it connected with you. It goes straight away to your heart. That is the power of music. That is the power of music.
It is a great platform where the student leaders from all over the nation express their thoughts. Vice chancellors from the various universities of India set the proceedings of the Parliament in motion. This is followed by the keynote speakers who share their knowledge and life experiences with the participants, which gives direction to the careers of the youth. During the Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad, various awards and honors are given to the eminent personalities who are inspirations for today's young leaders. Recipients of Jeevan Gaurav Puraskar, Lifetime Achievement Awards, Outstanding Promoter of Spirit of Democracy, National Unity and Integrity. Adarsh Mukhyamantri Puraskar, Ideal Chief Minister Award. Gargi and Maitreyi Puraskar, Women Members of Parliament. Best Use of Parliamentary Practices for Women Empowerment. Adarsh Yuva Vidhayak Puraskar, Best Outstanding Performance in Development Work and Promotion of Parliamentary Democracy. Adarsh Uch Shikshit Yuva Sarpanch Puraskar, Expression of Commitment towards Roots. Adarsh Yuva Adhyatmik Guru Puraskar, Ideal Youth Spiritual Guru Award. Visionary for Spiritual Renaissance of India and Promoter of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Heroes of India Puraskar. Krishi Yodha, Crusader of Agricultural Reforms. After every session, a resolution based on the theme related to the session is put to vote, where the young audience gives votes. If passed by the assembled leaders in majority, it is then sent to the respective government bodies for implementation. The event is widely covered by the electronic and print media at regional, national, and international level. With each passing year, Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad is gaining new grounds. More and more student leaders are adapting to the idea of entering public life through politics and shouldering the responsibility of serving the nation with determination and devotion. They have taken an oath to rid politics of criminalization and corruption and provide good governance at all costs so that India achieves a place of pride on international scene. Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad is an initiative to be the change.
Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad.
Yes. We are indeed honored to have Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, General Secretary, FDR, and founder of the Lok Satta Party as our chief guest today. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan is a former member of Legislative Assembly and former member of the National Advisory Council and also the Second Administrative Reforms Commission. And he is also the General Secretary of Foundation for Democratic Reforms. He's a physician by training, a public servant by choice, and a Democrat by conviction. He was one of the first physicians to join the elite Indian Administrative Services as one of the toppers in his batch of 1980. He distinguished himself over the ensuing 16 years in many administrative roles in Andhra Pradesh. He played a key administrative role in Andhra Pradesh as a secretary to the governor and also to the chief minister. He launched several significant and durable initiatives to liberate cooperatives from bureaucratic clutches, empower local governments, promote stakeholder empowerment, improve delivery of education and healthcare, and restructure the state's economy. Some of his major accomplishments while in government include: as a joint collector, he created full and permanent employment for 8,000 youth from displaced family of Visakhapatnam steel plant. As a collector of the Prakasham district in Andhra Pradesh, he was instrumental in the creation of a record 2 lakh acres of irrigation, the largest such program with direct participation of people. He has also worked on strengthening of the credit cooperatives and making them independent of government control. In order to translate his vision into practical reality, he resigned from civil service in 1996 and worked with like minded colleagues for the formation of Lok Satta. Lok Satta has emerged as India's leading civil society initiative for governance reforms. He has also been felicitated with several laurels, including the Rotary Manav Seva Award 2002, the Yudhveer Memorial Award 2002, Dr. Tirupati Raju Memorial Award 2004, Bharat Asmita Jana Jagran Shrestha Award, among a few. He has also served on several national panels. Notable among them are National Advisory Council from 2004 to 2006, Second Administrative Reforms Commission constituted by the Government of India from 2005 to 2007. His association with MIT SOG has been since its foundation. We are indeed honored to have you, sir, as the keynote speaker. We invite you for the keynote address.
Madam Chairperson, friends. First of all, let me congratulate the British High Commission and the MIT University of Peace for organizing this conference with the youth. I'm not a technology guy. I'm a medical doctor by training. While I love mathematics and physics, I could never take them as my calling or profession. In fact, my brush with technology of the modern kind, I remember 24 years ago, when I was leaving government, I wrote a detailed discussion paper giving my analysis of what is right and wrong with our country and its governance and what needs to be done. Friends all over the country and abroad, they said, will you please send copies to us? I said, fine, I'll mail them, give me your address. He said, no, you don't require to do that. You can email them. Truthfully, I never heard the expression email in 1996. I had no clue. They said, you wouldn't know, but go to the Software Technology Park. They will help you. By the time we already had electronic typewriters, where you don't have to repeat each time everything, you could actually correct it and so on and so forth. That was a big technology. So along with my assistant, I went to the Software Technology Park. The director took me around, took me to a computer room and put some floppy or disk or whatever and then pressed a few buttons, said, it's gone. I said, where has it gone? He said, wherever you wanted. I said, how did it go? No, it went, don't worry. Believe me, then as now, I'm wonderstruck. I now use email regularly. I Google 100 times a day, if not more. And I do occasionally use Twitter, not much more. Even as I use that, I'm astounded that something like this is actually possible, that is really happening. Things that you, the young people, take for granted are miracles for us. It's almost like a tribal 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, suddenly looking at the world, modern world, with the guns and the germs and the steel and the machines and all sorts of stuff, the electricity, and being wonderstruck. So I have a difficult challenge, not knowing much about the subject and yet waxing eloquent. Socrates, the great philosopher, 2,500 years ago, he had a dilemma like this. A disciple of his one day, he stood up and said, Master, for 20 years I listened to you with great attention, you and the other disciples interacting. I never once opened my mouth. Now, was it good or was it bad that I did not open my mouth? The great philosopher that he was, Socrates, said, young man, if you are wise, you are a fool. If you are a wise person, you are a fool. But if you are a fool, you are a wise man. It took me a bit of time to decipher. He said, if you actually are a wise person who had something to communicate and people would benefit from your thoughts and ideas, then you are a fool in having concealed them. But if you are a fool anyway, and there's nothing that they can learn from you, you are a wise man in having concealed your ignorance. So my challenge now is to conceal my ignorance and say a few words. So let me limit myself to a few reflections on this very complex challenge that the world is facing and the great opportunity that beckons us. We all know about the 3 revolutions preceding the 4th industrial revolution. The first one being the machine age as we understand. But the first revolution was largely about the steam engine and the fossil fuels. The second revolution was electricity, and therefore the domestic appliances and the hundreds of things that made life so comfortable, without which we cannot now survive, or so we think. The third, of course, is your age. Around the time you were born or before that, the digital age. The fourth is what we are now on the threshold of. Perhaps we're already part of that. It is a fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological as never before. It offers us an opportunity that is unprecedented in human history. It also poses some major challenges. Mr. Borlaug talked about Stephen Hawking. Among other things, Hawking warned us that, look, the evolution of a machine which is intelligent and therefore can design itself and improve itself instantly, versus the human evolution which is biological, there is a tremendous contrast. And he feared that eventually machines would overtake human beings and make us redundant. That was a relatively milder prediction. There were others who genuinely feared that it could be catastrophic, Armageddon. There are quite a few films. I'm sure you all must have watched Terminator, various versions, 1, 2, 3, whatever. And Matrix, I haven't watched that film. I mean, at least I could never really watch it fully, bits and pieces here and there, but I think it's also about this. So all kinds of apocalyptic visions of what could happen if the machines take over. We yet have to navigate because we don't have a choice of saying yes or no. We are now in an age when technology has a march of its own. Our challenge is how best we can apply and adapt, not whether or not to really embrace technology. That choice is taken out of us. We are probably in a vicious cycle. In fact, people like Harari say, even 10,000 years ago, we really gave up that choice. The moment we went in for agriculture, we got ourselves into a vicious cycle from which we could not come out. Therefore, now being wistful or nostalgic or atavistic does not help. We have to deal with this the best way we can. But without going into artificial intelligence, of which I understand very little, if at all, not that I understand others better, but at least others I use occasionally, therefore there's some sense of what it is. Let me look at this 4th industrial revolution in a broader sense. What are the things happening that are so dramatically altering the landscape, economically, politically, and socially? The first is obviously artificial intelligence and robotics. Many scholars actually believe that already the United States has probably lost more jobs to robotics and artificial intelligence than to outsourcing. The outsourcing is the one that's making the political waves, and that has led to the rise of Donald Trump, among other things. Perhaps actually more jobs are quietly lost already, traditional jobs are already lost to the modern technology. You take other areas, the more optimistic areas, energy sector. In the next 10 years, by 2030 or thereabout, we could actually enter the age of abundant, pollution-less energy. We already have the technologies. We just have to get a few things in place, just tying up the loose ends, and then transition from the fossil fuel power to the solar or other renewable forms of power, because building the grids and sustaining the supplies, and of course the storage capacity, which is also improving by the day, It takes time, but we are there. We are already there. The next decade could be a revolutionary decade in terms of energy technologies. The world of the oil is gone. Until recently, perhaps even today, the largest companies in terms of turnover and in terms of incomes, revenues, are the oil companies in the world. But already, if you see today, 7 of the 10 largest companies by market cap are technology companies. There's only one oil company among these 10. And I believe that's also a thing of the past. Very soon that will disappear. The world is changing with breathtaking rapidity. Oil era is actually nearing the end. When we were younger, like you guys, we were terrified of 2 things: the population, my God, the growth of population within the country and globally, and 2, my God, the oil dependence. And at that time, the fear was not so much pollution or global change, climate change. It was that actually peak oil production and there's no shortage of oil, and then where is energy for our economic activity in the world? Whereas today, truly, the oil problem is no longer going to be there in the next decade or more. We're going to enter a different world. And I also believe optimistically that we are actually seeing the beginning of the end of the population problem. India, for instance, today has probably 1.37 billion people or so. The more optimistic projections are we probably peak at about 1.6 billion and then taper off and slowly decline. Globally, we started off not too long ago. For young people here, to think that the global population was not very great earlier is unbelievable. We reached a billion population only in about 1800 AD. About 70 to 80,000 years of modern human beings, as we understand, after the great migration has started, Homo sapiens. It took about 80,000 years to become a billion population. By 1900, we were 1.6 billion. By 2000, 6 billion. 20th century saw a dramatic increase. By 2020, estimated 7.6 billion. But demographers say probably we will peak at about 9.6 to 10. Some people say up to 11 billion, which is high enough. But then it will start tapering off because world over, our own country is an example, including the state of Maharashtra, all the southern states, Punjab, Delhi, even Orissa and other states, the population growth levels are actually declining. So much so that we already reached a stabilization level. That means the fertility rates, the number of children a woman bears during her reproductive life, is under 2.1 in large parts of India. India itself is now at some 2.2 plus. In the next 3-4 years, India as a nation will come to an average of 2.1. But large parts of India are already well below 2.1. They're at 1.7, 1.8, 1.6, several states. Not that the population will suddenly decline, it will take some more time, but eventually it will taper off and decline. Africa, which is the fastest growing continent in the world today, demographically, dramatically increased in the population. Even there, the birth rates are declining significantly. So the 2 great problems that we thought we inherited are now the beginning of the end. The solutions are now in sight. And energy technologies, apart from healthcare technologies in case of population, has made a tremendous difference. The next 10 years is going to be radically different. If you're looking at electricity grids today, the power generation today, power transmission as we understand today, then you're looking at the past. You're not looking at the future. The third, new materials. The other day, I was reading something about an exciting material called PMP, phenyl methyl pentene, a certain isomer of that compound. We already know the technology of compressing this into thin sheets of 20 micron thickness, PMP, and embed very tiny glass cylinders of an appropriate diameter in a manner that they absorb all the heat in the surrounding areas and emit infrared radiation that goes into deep space that is not reflected back by the atmosphere. Between deep space and us, the difference is about 300 degrees. Deep space is practically absolute zero, minus 273. Average global temperature is about 27 or thereabout, or maybe 17. 290 degrees difference. So it's just going out. If you cover this building exposed to the sun, let us say, with this PMP film, which is already very inexpensive, it could cost as low as $1 per square meter already. Then it could reduce the temperature without air conditioning, without consumption of a single unit of energy, by about 19 degrees Celsius. You are seeing breathtaking changes in technology. The kind of things that were only imagined a quarter century ago, let alone a century ago. You take the aggregators, Uber and Ola, or Airbnb. The last 100 years, all economy world over is really about two sectors: automobiles, housing. Now with Airbnb, housing, at least in some respects, is no longer what it was in the past. And with Uber and Ola and all kinds of aggregators, only a fool would actually own a car in the future. Imagine the cost of a car. It will cost 1 million rupees to 5 million rupees, depending on your price range. And you have to have a parking space at home in very expensive urban areas. I'm sure in Pune, the cost per square meter of land is about 100,000 rupees, Dr. Haridas. In India, whatever be the other things, land prices simply skyrocket. And if you require, let's say, about 15 or 10 square meters of land, maybe 12 to 15 square meters of land for parking at home, you are wasting away about 1.5 million rupees of land. And then go out. When you drive, you have to park it in the commercial space. The cost is even higher, maybe 30 lakh rupees. And then how long do you drive actually in this country? On an average, a car owner probably spends about 5% of the time in a day. That's maximum in the car. And all this for prestige. And once both the mass transport and the aggregators, they become a reality, and they're already a reality in some senses, and we have to make other things happen. The automobile, as we know, is a thing of the past. Something unbelievable, except in that unique country called the United States. Probably it'll take much longer in the US for the automobile to disappear. Second is housing, already I mentioned, with Airbnb and stuff like that, with greater and more innovative models of dwellings and commercial occupations and so on and so forth coming up. The economy, as we understood, is going to be radically transformed because of the changes in technology, not necessarily because of policy. And of course, nanotechnologies, biometrics, and changes in transgenic technologies. Some of the challenges that we haven't yet conquered, metabolic disorders, quite a few of them. I'm a medical doctor by training, among other things. And of course, some of the cancers, 70% of the cancers, if we detect early, luckily, we can prolong life significantly. In some cases, we can even use the word which was unthinkable some time ago, cure. But still, there are significant number of cancers and metabolic disorders which are beyond our capacity to handle today. But once we conquer the gene technologies, and I think we are well on our way to conquering some of them at least, we could well say after 20 years, we can prevent or cure cancers and metabolic disorders. So this is a world of a different kind altogether. There are many people who say that 70% of the jobs that you guys are going to hold in your lifetimes have not yet been created. We don't even know what these jobs are. We can imagine some of them, but we don't really have a clue. Are we preparing ourselves for that? Or are we training our youth for the past? It's bad enough that whatever be the training, our training is appallingly bad. I was having a discussion with Mr. Borlow. While our intellectual tradition as a society is very strong, our actual accomplishments at school level are incredibly poor. Only 1% of kids in India are at global standards in education, not because of their lack of intelligence or parental sacrifice or governmental spend. It simply is that we built a third-rate structure and system. About 10-15% of the kids can be roughly at the average level, and they can pick up and then match. But about 80% kids, for no fault of theirs, are not able to fulfill their potential. But even if we fulfill our potential, many countries are now finding it hard to imagine what kind of world we're going to be living in, and therefore how to prepare our young people for the productive economic activity of the future. In our country, it's a bigger challenge, a challenge we need to address, and I believe a challenge we can address if we set our minds to it. AI and robotics, obviously there are, Mr. Borlow mentioned several of these areas, for instance, but there are some areas already they're yielding dividends to us. Speech recognition technology, even somebody like me understands the value, though I haven't yet been able to train my machines to recognize my speech and then give me the transcript effectively yet. But I think it's getting better and better. We all know that. The facial recognition with all these pluses and minuses, we all know the potential already. Many security forces, police forces world over are utilizing it already. In the field of radiology, radiologists are hot commodities now. Now in India, if you want to go to radiology as a specialty, even to get admission into university, it costs you probably about 10 to 20 million rupees. There's so much of shortage, so much of demand, but I think it's only temporary. The machines are now pretty close to be able to replace the radiologist, because basically imaging, and with algorithms, the machine can actually diagnose better than a radiologist. Radiologist may sometimes miss because after all, it's only the naked eye, whereas a machine is much more efficient. You take the supply chains in the transport systems. Already dramatic changes happening in the transport, logistics, and supply chains. And even in the retail chains across the world, how the AI has taken over and replenishing the things. And thousands of commodities are there on display. Inventory management, replenishment, without human interaction. So these are self-evident. But if you go beyond that, while there are immense possibilities, there are also potential real dangers we have to recognize. How many of you have heard of Stanislaw Petrov? A man called Stanislaw Petrov. Let me tell you a story about him. Petrov was born in 1939 in the then Soviet Union. He was in the command center, nuclear command center, in a place called Oko in Siberia, Oko Nuclear Early Warning System. On the 16th of September 1983, suddenly on his radar screen, he saw that a nuclear missile was launched from mainland United States on the Soviet Union, with the Soviet Union as target. In 2 minutes' time, 4 more missiles were launched. Just about 20 days before that, I think this was 26th September, I'm sorry, not 16th. Just about 25 days before that, the Soviet Union shot and downed a Korean Airlines plane 007, incidentally, the James Bond number, mistaking it for a spy plane. A civilian aircraft with 269 passengers were killed. Therefore, there was heightened tension. And here, an officer whose job it was to detect the early missile launch from the United States, from the enemy country, and heading towards your country, and therefore alert the missile commanders so that they can in turn launch the countermeasures. It was his job, Stanislaw Petrov. But Petrov, luckily, was not a machine with artificial intelligence. He was a human being. He knew the consequences of his decision. If he alerted the high command about the missiles on their way to Soviet Union, the high command had no option but to launch their own missiles. And he knew it was a nuclear war, Armageddon. And his common sense told him that while 26 days ago there was an incident There was nothing dramatic that happened in the recent days. There was no evidence that missiles were being moved in the United States, that they were preparing for a war or countermeasures or getting ready for retaliatory strike and so on and so forth. Therefore, he said, maybe the machine was wrong. He waited for a fateful 20 minutes. He was proved to be right. The machine was wrong. But if the machine was not wrong, the warning was right, that fateful 20 minutes delay would have been fatal for Soviet Union. But because there was no artificial intelligence, it was a human being who applied his sense and his sense of his desire for human race's survival. The world was saved. Stanislaw Petrov, in many ways, is the unsung hero of the Cold War. Machines are good. Machines have immense value. We all benefited in the past 500 years with machines. But machines may not always be the answers. There are limitations. There are potential hazards. There are real hazards. If we allow our exuberance for technology to overtake our sense of survival, our own instinct for collective survival as human race, that will be a sad day. I sound like a Luddite, but there are some areas where there have to be safeguards. Society has to be protected, because just because I have the bomb in my hand, it doesn't mean that I can use it to blow up this place. We have to figure out. Because we now live in an anthropocentric world. If we go beyond the human species, it's not only anthropocentric, it's also anthropomorphic. We are reshaping the world, and we're the center of the universe, at least the planet Earth universe. Just look at the numbers. In the whole world, there are only 80,000 giraffes. But there are 1.5 billion farmyard cattle, which we raise to eat meat. 80,000 giraffes, 1.5 billion farmyard cattle. There are only 200,000 wolves, but there are 400 million domesticated dogs. There are only 250,000 chimpanzees, but there are almost 7 billion humans. Look at the sheer numbers. We have completely dominated planet Earth. But increasingly, we now realize that unless we also have an ecological perspective, look at the consequences of our actions, we might be succeeding only too well for our own good. We may actually end up damaging ourselves. Therefore, how do you find the balance? That's the challenge. Let me conclude with a few thoughts about other consequences. Economy. Certainly, the world is seeing an era in which fewer and fewer people are producing more and more. This is a unique thing about our era. The ancient man had to work very hard throughout the day to simply eke out a livelihood, to be able to gather or hunt enough food to survive. Today, fewer and fewer people are producing more and more in the world. What do you do with the rest of the people? And in a world, if the bulk of the people are not required to work, what happens? Not only the incomes of the individuals, but the alienation. Without productivity, without creativity, without pursuit of a useful activity, what happens to human race, the bulk of the human beings? The individual alienation and the social and economic consequences. And society. Inequalities tend to grow with technology. We already know that 7 of the largest companies, 10 largest companies in the world are technology companies. Technology has a way of aggregating wealth, not only aggregating information. Whether you like it or not, I don't think there's an easy substitute to a Facebook and a Microsoft and and Google. And if technology continues to have this tendency of aggregation and therefore accumulation of wealth in a world already beset by inequalities, not only between individuals, but across regions and across groups, how are we going to deal with that? It's a humongous political and social challenge apart from an economic challenge. And in the Indian context, we have bigger challenges. Even for the old economy, we are not fully prepared. Our education is incredibly bad. Our kids are very bright. Our parents sacrifice a great deal. Our government spend a lot of money. Our society values education. Even the slokas chanted in the beginning of this session, or our intellectual tradition, they're incredible. And yet, our educational outcomes are appallingly bad. We were not even prepared for the old economy. If 1% people are prepared for the new economy, but the rest of the people are completely bypassed, except as distant, passive consumers of some of the technologies, then what will happen to this nation and its future, economically and politically? Can we sustain, or can 19th century politics coexist with 21st century economy? The political institutions are moribund. You have seen what's happened in this state of Maharashtra in the past few weeks. Just 3 days ago, we had an election in my state of Telangana for the local municipal councils. Very weak bodies without any empowerment, and yet more than 10 billion rupees was spent when only 3 million people voted. You are looking at 4,000 rupees spent per vote, the highest in the world. Much of it is for vote buying. So can that 19th century politics and 21st century economy go together? What will give way? And finally, as people like Professor Hawking feared, will man's limited capacity to evolve or slow evolution versus the rapid technological change, will there be a tremendous rupture? Even now, there is evidence to show that the social institutions are not able to adapt to the rapid economic and technological changes. And that's the reason why you have identity politics, because tribalism in many ways is hardwired into our DNA. Whereas modern world is about building networks and cooperating across all these barriers between the economic necessity and our own anthropologic impulses, atavistic impulses, primordial loyalties. There is a clash. Much of the world is now facing this. Will this get better or worse? Or are we going to be able to deal with that? These are the exciting challenges of the future. But one thing I would urge the young people to remember. People often ask me how I keep on fighting for reform in this country against very heavy odds, and years now rolling into decades, and hopefully it will not be much too long, but definitely it may be another generation. I remind them of one story. There was a man called Ignaz Semmelweis. Ignaz Semmelweis was born in Austria in 1819. He rose to be a physician. As a physician in his practice, he discovered that about 30 to 40% women were dying at the time of childbirth, either because of childbirth or after childbirth because of what we now know as infections. In those days, the word infection was not known. Bacteria were not discovered. They called it puerperal fever, fever related to childbirth. And women died in large numbers. Quite by accident, or maybe he made some efforts to try and understand the problem or the solution, Semmelweis discovered that if you washed your hands properly, what we now call sterilization, if you washed your hand properly before assisting a woman in labor and before going to the next patient, then miraculously about 90 to 95% of these women were saved. The mortality rates came down dramatically. He was excited. He did not know why. but it was empirically proved. He was excited. He set out to educate not the ordinary folks of Europe. Remember, by 1819 already, the first revolution was well underway, Industrial Revolution. Already manufacturing, the Enlightenment project, the whole logical framework, rationalism, they have taken tremendous hold of European psyche, popular imagination. Despite that, when he tried to educate his fellow professionals, the doctors, they all laughed him off and branded him as insane. Semmelweis was incarcerated in a mental asylum as an insane man because he committed the unpardonable sin of asking doctors to wash their hands. Semmelweis were beaten up in that madhouse, literally a madhouse. Because in those days, for people with psychiatric illness, the only thing was physical torture. Ultimately, he died of the injuries he sustained at the age of 46 in 1865. Mankind is not always wise enough to understand what is in its best interest in the short term. A few individuals transcend these barriers, look into the future. But here is the good news. Within 20 years, 3 great men followed Semmelweis, inspired by him. One was Robert Koch, the man who discovered the tubercle bacilli, the man who gave us what are called Koch's postulates. If you say, for instance, the Wuhan virus is causing this disease, you can't say it casually. There are certain standards, scientific standards. It was Koch who first developed those postulates. Louis Pasteur, many people know his name, pasteurization, milk, and so on and so forth. And of course, the vaccination. He was the one who came up along with Jenner with vaccination techniques. And a man called Lister, even today, some of you who use mouthwash, Listerine is a very common mouthwash named after Lister. All were contemporaries. A generation after Semmelweis, influenced and inspired by his work, they together changed the world. The world will be changed for the better, but not instantly, not in the very short term sometimes. The challenge is, how do you bridge the gap between the capacity to look at the long term and make the change happen, and the society's ability and willingness to accept that change and embrace it and to make the most of it? The second challenge is, particularly in case of certain technologies which have the potential downside, like artificial intelligence, sometimes going haywire. Can we have enough safeguards to make sure that we get the best out of it, but do not suffer the potentially dangerous consequences? I'm sure this conference, as many dialogues and conversations going on across the world, will throw light, energize us, inspire us, influence our thinking, and make us innovate, and hopefully, 20 years later, make for a much, much better world without much downside. I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for those insightful and interesting words. We'll take 2 questions, exactly 2 very short questions. If somebody is ready with their questions, we have our volunteer. Anybody interested in any questions? We'll just take 2 questions. Yes, one. Be very brief and be to the point.
Hello everyone, my name is Syed Nejat Musavi. I am from Afghanistan, a civil engineer. My question is, sir, you mentioned something about global issues, and I have a question also about global issues. Sir, the economic power of the world, countries like USA, UK, Russia, China, and India, they are spent yearly, they are spend yearly trillions of dollars for producing of weapons, dangerous weapons. They are spending yearly. My question is this, sir: how we can convince them to this huge amount of money we have to spend in education, in environmental, in transportation field, and also for better condition life of poverty people? Why we spend this huge amount of money to produce gun and ballistic missile to fight with each other? Sir, it's a issue for me.
Yes,
Yeah.
your question is clear. One more question from the audience, and then sir will answer it together, I guess. Yes. Okay.
I don't know if there is an answer that I can give any better than the world has attempted in the past 70 years, ever since the nuclear age has come into vogue. But I'm an optimist. The fact that for 70 years, by and large, we've had the most stable and peaceful period in the history of modern world shows us that there is some amount of wisdom, and perhaps there are some internal checks and safeguards within the societies. I mentioned Stanislaw Petrov, for instance. Therefore, while there are some risks, we must recognize that this is the best of all possible ages. And I also believe that if you take the global picture, I haven't done a study lately, but I'm reasonably confident if you take a global picture, the percentage of GDP in each nation, if you take the global average, spent on defense and armaments actually is declining. Even this is bad enough. I'm not saying this is insignificant or we should ignore it. It's a problem. If you take the total global trade in arms and armaments, it is no more than a fraction of the global production or even global trade. It's well under $100 billion. The total trade in armaments and arms in the world annually, international trade I'm talking about, not domestic purchase or procurement, is well under 100 billion. Probably it's close to actually 50 billion or thereabout. It should be zero, I agree. But things are getting better. And I hope our collective wisdom and our own voice and our own instinct for self-preservation will make our political masters and our military generals much more cautious. And no serious military general wants a war. Only a reckless madman wants war. And I hope that we will be able to further reduce this. So while it is a challenge, I think in the past 70 years, this is a relatively more peaceful period in that sense. So I'm optimistic, but I don't have ready answers. I can't tell you this is the way to go about it. I hope we will wake up in the next generation. Your generation will shape that world.
I hope you have got a satisfactory answer. Due to paucity of time, we are closing the session. Somebody else is asking any
I
question?
thought one lady had a microphone and... Okay,
No.
Otherwise we can close.
Okay. So on behalf of British Deputy High Commission Mumbai and also on behalf of MIT World Peace University and SOG, we thank you, sir, for gracing this occasion with your presence and for such a wonderful address to the audience. And thank you, ma'am, for being on stage and chairing the session. We'll start off the first panel discussion. I request you to please be seated downstairs so that we can straight away start with the first panel discussion. The first panel will be talking about artificial intelligence futures, international relations, autonomy, inclusion, and security. I request all the panel members to come over to the dais so that we can start off with the discussion. With a huge round of applause, let us welcome Mr. Saikat Datta, South Asia editor of Asia Times Online. He is in charge of the coverage across India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. He is also a strategic advisor to Nalcon, India's biggest cybersecurity community, and has worked as a policy director with the Center for Internet and Security, India, till September 2018. He's an award-winning journalist with over 20 years as an editor and investigative reporter with several news organizations. He has been a defense correspondent with the Indian Express and assistant editor with the Outlook magazine and resident editor with DNA. He is also the member of the editorial board with Z News and editor of national security with Hindustan Times. Let us welcome Mr. Saikat Datta over to the dais. Next, let us welcome Mr. Utkarsh Amitabh, Senior Business Development Manager, Microsoft, over to the dais. He works at Microsoft and is the founder of Network Capital, one of the world's largest peer mentoring and career navigation communities, set up with the core belief that everyone has something to learn and something to share. Network Capital has organically grown to become a global tribe of 50,000 mentors from over 104 countries. Utkarsh is a Chevening Fellow at Oxford University and a World Economic Forum Global Shaper who represented the community both at Davos and Dalian. He has an MBA from INSEAD Business School, where he was recognized as the Andy Burgess Scholar. Let us also welcome Mr. Prakhar Mishra, Associate from IDFC Institute. He was a Chevening Scholar reading for Masters in Public Policy at the University of Oxford. He was also a researcher at the Blavatnik School of Government, analyzing the trends in the evolution of Indian nationalism under Dr. Maya Tudor. He has completed his postgraduate degree in economics and finance from Meghnad Desai Academy of Economics, where he was a Chanakya scholar. His thesis was titled The India and the Impossible Trinity. He also holds a bachelor's in engineering from Ramaya Institute of Technology. Last but not the least, let us welcome the last panel member, Ms. N.S. Napinai, Advocate, Supreme Court, Principal Napinai and Co. She is a highly respected advocate practicing before the Supreme Court of India and Bombay High Court, who has pioneered the development of cyber laws in India. She has handled an array of cases pertaining to constitutional, criminal, IPR, cyber laws, corporate and commercial laws and transactions. She is amicus curiae before the Supreme Court in Prajwala versus Union of India and part of the government committee formed therefore. We have Mr. Nivedit Alva as the moderator of this session. With a huge round of applause, let us welcome him. He's a well-known TV and media industry veteran and the creative brain behind some of the India's biggest entertainment brands like Indian Idol and MTV Roadies. His production spanning genres as diverse as documentary, reality, lifestyle and entertainment has won critical acclaim and numerous awards for over a decade. Nivedit has also been involved in public service through the Alva Foundation. With a huge round of applause, let us once again welcome all the panel members and the moderators. The topic is AI futures, international relations, autonomy, inclusion, and security. I now hand over to the moderator.
I think I'll start from there and then come here. It should be easier. Sorry. There's a mic. I know, it just feels easier. I think I'll start from here and go over there because then I have to be quiet for the rest of the session. Morning all, welcome to this panel. Being a television producer for over 20 years, I've pretty much done everything, but this is the first for me. This is a role I've never played before, to moderate a panel, so I'm going to give it my best. And this is the first time I've had to actually do a lot of homework to prepare for something because it's like we've been talking about AI. Once you've been preparing for this, suddenly that word stands out. It's like I'm an algorithm for AI now. Everywhere I look, every paper I look, it jumps out at you, and that's the only thing you notice. Today, in today's day and age, a lot of the news we watch, a lot of what we see on TV, there is bias in everything, or so is claimed. I have no bias, and I do not know everything. I'd like to state that right ahead before we start this off. So the way we're going to go about this is I'm going to speak for a couple of minutes to introduce what we're doing, a quick word on what our panelists will be speaking, and then I will throw to them. In late 2015, Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, declared, as was said earlier today, on the fourth industrial revolution. This revolution is different from its predecessors. It will disrupt without regard for industries and borders. It will fundamentally alter the way we live and work and relate to one another. Be it scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has not just seen, but even experienced before. The acceleration of innovation and the velocity of disruption will be hard to comprehend and anticipate. Also, the speed with which we are developing and innovating will ensure that even for the best connected of us, even for the most informed of us, there will still be an element of surprise. The key thing today also is that this phase AI stands at a sort of intersection of the scientific world, the technology world, and the consumer world. And yet, each of these sees it in a very different manner. Having said that, who makes the rules? What are the rules? Who decides what is right, what is wrong? And this is something, like we've all been talking about now, is going to impact each and every one of us every single day. So that's what our panel is going to talk about today. I'm going to give a brief introduction. I know it was done, but just Saikat Datta, a well-known journalist and the South Asia editor of the Asia Times, was my Facebook friend for long, followed a lot of his work on Twitter, but met him for the first time this morning. He will be speaking to us on AI and its impact on international relations and international security. Utkarsh Amitabh, the founder of Network Capital, will be speaking about AI for inclusion, how AI can empower communities to create meaningful economic opportunities, especially with matching talent with opportunities. Also, he's very keen to speak to us about the role of education in shaping the AI powerful world. Prabhakar Mishra is an associate with the IDFC Institute and a Chevening scholar. He will speak to us about state capacity and the governance of AI, the role of the bureaucracy from a security angle. Having read some of your articles, I would also like to hear your views on the Data Protection Authority, what it is shaping out to be, and what it should shape out to be. Ms. Napinyai is an advocate for the Supreme Court, also a Chevening scholar, and she will speak to us about the legal aspects and the need of harmonizing laws across nations, the ethical issues with AI and its effective enforcement. So I'm going to come right, this is on now? Come right back, sorry. And Saikat, would you like to go first?
Okay. I must also confess that Nivedit and me are in a unique position. We are the only two non-Chevening scholars on this panel. So that should hold for some special marks for us, while the rest of you don't get that.
So, I think they got the hint. You're going to get the invite next year.
So, but I guess nearly all of you have a cell phone now. You probably use a mobile phone. And every time you have a network coverage issue, you call up a number, which is supposed to be the customer service center of your phone or the mobile operator, and you hear an automatic voice. And how many of you are constantly waiting to hit the number 9 so that you can speak to an actual person? So I like to use this analogy to talk about, the interaction between humans and machines is in some way going to be like that. So the IVR system that you constantly speak on is in some ways a very low level, but it is still artificial intelligence, which has been fed a certain kind of logic, and it is reacting to that kind of logic or the coding that it has been given to it. And as you keep inputting more and more data, it then goes on that, are you calling about your broadband? Are you calling about your mobile? Are you calling about this? And finally, after going through 15 or 20 hoops, you actually get to speak to a human being. And that tells you a lot about how many of us really want artificial intelligence and what kind of interaction we will do with. So in his opening remarks, Nivedit spoke about that it's a mixture of technology, science, and consumers. But there was one thing that he could have added, and I think in some ways is the most important thing, which is it's all about politics. And when I say politics, everything that you do, every food that you eat, the kind of houses you live, the life you choose, everything is, the personal is actually politics, because through politics we decide what will be our rules, our set of rules which will govern society. So whenever we look at technology, we must first appreciate that this has to be understood from a political situation and a political consensus, that technology will come and impact us in a certain manner, and therefore what are the political repercussions, what kind of policies, what kind of laws, what kind of ethics will be build a framework around it. And to very quickly, three more things. One is, I'll give you two quick examples of how international relations are getting impacted by artificial intelligence. One is something that has happened very recently, is the killing of an Iranian general, serving general, by a drone, which is now much more efficiently able to assassinate people in a foreign country because of the kind of AI that has been worked into the command and control systems of the drone system. And before that, if you have heard of a man called Edward Snowden, and if you've heard about the Snowden papers which were leaked, you suddenly realize the amount of data that international intelligence agencies are now picking up, which is now impacting international relations in a way we had never thought of, because of the speed at which big data can be taken, a certain logic can be fed into it, and it evolves a decision in a speed and time that none of us had ever thought about. And therefore, to close my opening remarks, warfare, diplomacy, etc., come basically around a certain phenomenon called the OODA leap, which is you observe, you orient, you take a decision, and then you act. And we are constantly trying to speed up the OODA loop. And AI today is impacting us and speeding up the OODA loop to such an extent that we are trying to grapple with it. But as I said, the speed, the technology, the complexity are not the big questions. The big question in this segment will always be, what are the kind of political decisions have we taken? Or if we are part of India, then what kind of directions does our constitution give us, which can help us shape some of these answers?
Okay, so let's park the politics for a second and move to the economics of it, right? So, Utkarsh.
Check. Just want to make sure that, am I audible at the back?
That's what I was going to say.
I think the mic.
Even he's audible. I think you may want to use this.
Am I audible? Yes. Okay, perfect. Yeah. It's great to see so many students and dignitaries here. But you know, before I start my remarks on AI, because it's such a misunderstood term, I just want one of you to tell me what AI is. Anyone? Please don't do this. Come on. There's no one definition.
May I?
No, I would want to hear the students.
I can get them started.
Yes, please. Anyone? Just what is the first thing that comes? Yes, please. Got it. Anyone else?
Come on, give her a chance. Poor thing, she tried twice.
I was just going to say something that replaces natural stupidity.
Something that natural. Not sure I agree with that. but anyone, like really? Yes, please. Substituted, right? Like that's the word that. So my initial remarks are, whenever we talk about AI or any kind of technology, we assume that the future has already been decided. And I want you to remember one thing, that technology is never deterministic. It is very much a function of the choices that we take today. So I'm really passionate about data science and communities. And I feel that in the future, how many of you actually studied or chose what you studied because of your passion or your curiosity? 3 people out of 300, 4 people out. And how many of you decided just because, okay, let's just do something and then we'll figure out what life is? Or mom told so. Exactly, right?
In the front row.
What happens is that we assume that our path is already charted out. And I think data science and communities are here to change that. When we talk about AI, and when we combine AI with communities, you essentially decentralize decision-making. I started Network Capital with a very simple idea, that every single person in the world, a beggar, a billionaire, a data scientist, a poet, a philosopher, has some unique skill or an experience that he or she brings to the table. When you take that and look at the world as a global community, you can just skill share at scale. You can augment trust And AI plus communities, I think, is going to be the future of work. Like many of you chose the path that you chose for your careers just because somebody nudged you to, or you didn't know better. I think in future there will be a way to match purpose, your innate talent, with the kind of career that you want to build in the future. Because my core philosophy is that if we want to shape a better world, if we want to shape a world where there's gender equity, we are working towards climate change, we are looking to replace, say, the threat of automation with meaningful jobs, I think each of us need to feel empowered. There's nothing worse in the world than feeling disempowered. And I think that the current debate on AI makes us all feel really disempowered. We all keep hearing talks about automation, job loss, this and that. But automation has always been there. There's nothing new about it. It's just happening at a different scale altogether. Historian Yuval Noah Harari talks about this in extensive detail, that feeling irrelevant is sometimes much worse than having no economic opportunity. And I feel that these two aren't the only choices that we have in front of us. All of you in college right now, you have a choice to make. All of you don't need to become data scientists. All of you don't necessarily need to create a career in AI, but all of you will be impacted in some shape or form by technology, whether you're a doctor, engineer, poet, or philosopher. You just need to figure out a way to make technology work for you. In what I do, I match people with their purpose, with the jobs that they want to do, or with the kind of careers that they want to do, with the help of a tribe or a community. That is something that I've stumbled upon that combines my passion, my purpose, with the career that I aspire to build. You don't need to follow this. You can create your own path. But the first step actually begins by understanding and creating a definition of AI that works for you. There are multiple ways to interpret it, but see how it applies to your life and figure out a way to make it work for you. That said, AI or any kind of technology is never just a bundle of roses or a bunch of demons staring at you. It's often a bit of both. And with your intelligence and you being part of a global community or a community of this college or whatever, you essentially learn to solve problems your way. Look, we live in a world where there are massive challenges and massive opportunities. You need to know that you can't do this alone. You need to think globally and act locally. I know it's a party line from back in the day, but today it's more relevant than the other. Climate change is not a problem of India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka or the United States. It's a global challenge. So one thing that we need to build upon is global cooperation. And it all starts with us, the youth. That is why I believe this Young Thinkers Conclave is such an important step. I think we need to take some of the things that we discussed and maybe after that debate it a little more and see how we can scale. Because institutions have not really worked for us as well as we would have liked. Politicians and many others, there's a lot of scope for improvement there as well. So the only hope is the communities that we form today and augment it with technology and know that it's not preordained. It's very much a function of what we do today and the choices we take. Thank you.
Thanks. It's just, before we move on, I mean, there's one point which immediately came to mind. In fact, even when I was doing some reading, I don't think it's the thing about painting it all bad, right? But I think where there is a little bit of awakening, so to say, is that while a lot of this was earlier at the theory or say the academic validation phase, there was some sort of a safety net around it, right? Now, when academic validation has moved to the commercialization of it, that is where the sort of boundaries have gotten merged and where you read a lot of articles. Yesterday, I was reading something where some guy who's developed something, but basically he says, hey, if I don't do it, somebody else will, right? If my company doesn't do it, somebody else will. And I am saying that it's great I did it because I'm going to do it ethically and, I'm going to be correct about it, so to say, but somebody else might use the same thing in a different way, right? So that is where I think the whole good cop, bad cop sort of thing. So it's not about painting it bad or saying that, it's all wrong, but I think there is also a group now within that is trying to enforce the academic validation part of it, which has somewhere gotten merged over the last few years with saying, brush it aside, let's get a move on it.
Yeah, so I just want to make a quick remark before we move on. I'm going to touch upon this later. You know, the concept of data colonization. I don't want to discuss it now because it'll take me a while. But again, it's not about good or bad. It's not the right. It's you need to ask the right questions. It's never, no technology is good or bad. And I think in the AI evolution, we are still not even in its infancy. The scenario of the stuff that we're really worried about is called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. And we are nowhere close to achieving that. So should we not ask the questions in chill? Of course not. But we need to, you know, ask the right questions. And many of the times, it's not the right question that we're asking.
Thank you. Prabhakar?
Yeah. Hi.
Mike?
Can you hear me?
No.
Hi. Am I audible? Okay. Hi, my name is Prakhar. I work in public policy. So, and I'm a post-90s, post-liberalization kid. So I sort of look at the world through that view. I don't know what it means to stand in lines to get telephone connections and scooters. And therefore that energy, that vigor, that expectations comes through in public policy, right? But perpetually, when you're working in public policy, you have one leg in the academic boat in order to ensure the necessary rigor so that you don't get things wrong. But at the same time, you have the other leg in the policy space where things need to move forward, right? There's always chaos and you have to figure out some order into it. And the role of technology in this sort of mix is curious. It's a beast that is hard to tame because it always moves faster than technology than policy can catch up. And that's where the challenge lies, right? And especially even with artificial intelligence. What makes AI very different is in its conception, AI is autonomous in nature. Therefore, it can evolve itself. So when public policy needs to curtail and put guardrails around artificial intelligence, one wonders how do you do that because you're unsure of what it will evolve into. And therefore the pink-eyed terminators kind of take over the AI that actually drives your Gmail as well, which gives you responses on what you should, what your next word should be, right? So it's artificial intelligence on both sides, but public policy, of course, takes one particular view, which is a perception-based idea made by political leaders. And this is, at core, changes the state-citizen relationship, and therefore the relationship between states as well, right? So what changes with AI, which is different from other technologies, is what I feel is the role of non-state actors in some sense, or private individuals, right? Because those are the ones that are developing the technologies, those are the ones that understand it the best. And therefore their involvement within the policy space, within the regulation space becomes imperative, right? The sovereignty of these individuals no longer remains subservient to the sovereignty of the state. And therefore you have corporations, you have coders, you have hackers, people sitting in different areas, sitting in silos, but changing the way millions of people behave and millions of people act. And that is something that policy needs to react to every single day. The skill sets of officials within the government and the skill sets of officials who are responsible for regulating such technologies is always one step back. And that's the challenge here, right? So you do see some states like Punjab, for instance, who has very recently hired a chief technology officer in order to take it forward, or Andhra Pradesh, for that matter, who's created the resident state data hubs, and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is a debatable. Is another debate in and of itself, but you do see technology being more and more involved in government, right? A classic case of where this helps in international relations is China, where they've built algorithms in order for them to try and predict the outcome of certain trade negotiations, for instance. And that's what helps in saving a lot of manpower, saving a lot of energy, right? So think of the the EU-Canada trade agreement, CETA, where the trade agreement went on for 8 long years, and then a very small state within Belgium called Wallonia, maybe 50,000, 60,000 people, vetoed that agreement, right? And after 8 long years of talking through things, and it's a big complex exercise, the whole thing falls apart. And this is where policymakers think AI comes into the picture in an international relations sense in a very positive way, right, to that degree. And that's where it helps. But Locally speaking, even though it brings about efficiency in outcomes, it changes socio-economic dynamic, right? So think of logistics firms, for instance, who may be able to run driverless trucks a lot more efficiently, save a lot of fuel, money, etc., get on time. But what happens to those lobbies of drivers, those lobbies of those logistics firms, and how that creates backlashes, right? And given to the earlier idea of how sovereignty of individuals is no longer subservient to the state, they could try and mobilize support internationally, and that could become a big issue for that particular government. So those are the kind of issues that governments face in terms of regulating technologies, right? The other thing that they do is legitimize certain uses. So China, for instance, because it can monitor, identify, locate, arrest individuals, and that is something that's largely in the news, at some level it legitimizes the use of that technology for that particular purpose. And those are the kind of things that one needs to be wary about, and those are the kind of things that one needs to control, so that such uses are minimal, if at all, right? What does drive AI is the quality of data on which AI is trained, right? And therefore that becomes extremely, extremely important. So you have firms in Bhubaneswar, for instance, that Google is basically asking people to sit in front of a computer and just tag certain images, right? Recently, Twitter went after Clearview AI, which is a firm who downloaded images from Twitter's social media platform and just tagged certain images and is giving it to local officials, policemen, even the FBI, etc., for a use that we don't know about. So the training data set, the base data set, is what drives the quality of the artificial intelligence technology deployed, right? And this is where the challenge arises. So when you walk into Nigeria, there is at the airport, it scans your eye to detect for the Zika virus. And artificially, it sort of tries to figure that out for yourself. And that's a technology within public good. But what happens to the data that it's scanned of your iris, right? What happens after is what is unknown and is what is problematic. And those are the guardrails that public policy needs to figure out, right? China has a AI where they take everything from cocktail gossip conversations to satellite images and try and sort of predict what outcomes will be, right? And this is the big challenge, which is if we cannot determine the quality of the data set, what should the regulation do, right? Should we say it's okay, let's try it out and see where it goes, or should we take a step back and completely not allow it, right? And this is a folklore, I'm not sure if this is true. So that when cars were first introduced in the US, there were regulations like if a horse is passing the road, you need to completely turn off your car, you need to raise a red flag and things like that, because it may mess with the sort of the mental health of the horse, right? And therefore those were the kind of regulations that were put in place. So quickly, what should state capacity and regulation look like in the world of AI, right? So one, of course, is let's try and regulate the creation of AI rather than the use in some sense, which is what is that training data set that is being used, that is being deployed in order to create that technology. And second is, I mean, which has been talked about and is kind of fairly obvious, the need of an international regime to try and come up with some principles that are global in nature as well as can be locally sort of transported and applied, right? And this may look very different from a World Bank kind of a scenario, to take it back to the role of non-state actors, right? Maybe something like a marketplace where you have people giving more and more AI algorithms and bringing that package together in order to make the world a better place. So I'll end with this comic strip that I'd seen earlier, where you had robos fighting humans, and one human asked the other on why are the robos using bows and arrows, and the other human says because historically most wars are won using bows and arrows. And that's the challenge, that's the big challenge with training data sets on which you train machines, right? You have cases in Laos, for instance, where an MRI scan is taken and the machine is writing it up completely on its own. And then suddenly you realize that a particular pin code of Laos, the prescriptions are exactly the same, because what the machine is doing is no longer looking at the data of the MRI machine, it is simply looking at the pin code and the kind of prescriptions that were given and using that as the metric in order to determine prescriptions. And if this is not looked upon by another doctor or any other human intervention, it could be massively problematic. So yeah, so those are my remarks on public policy and artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.
Would you like to speak about India's data authority now? Would you like to
Yeah, sure.
A little bit about it.
Yeah, so there is the Personal Data Protection Bill, which has been passed. So a neat distinction needs to be made. Sorry, it's not been passed. It's been tabled in the Parliament. It's now with the committee. The neat distinction needs to be made is it deals only with data that is personal data and not non-personal. The way non-personal data is defined is anything that is not personal data. And personal data is anything that can identify you, right? And of course, there are nuances to this, but to put it out there crudely, within the bill, they're creating a Data Protection Authority of India, DPA, and what they're trying to do is have a body that regulates the use of such data, the implementation of such data, etc. There are some processes that are set in place in terms of the appointment of the body and what the future looks like, but broadly speaking,
let me guess, it'll be run by bureaucrats.
It is, yes. The selection committee that is supposed to select or appoint the body is 3 people, and all of them are secretaries at a secretary level, right? There was an earlier version of the bill where there was a better mix with chief justices, some experts, etc. But currently that's not the case. We don't know the exact functions, processes, because all of that has been left to the committee or to a future sort of process where we'll come up with that. But that's where India is with respect to its data protection law, data protection bill, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to do something with it. We've been speaking to people in ministries and we realize that AI is actually really hard, because how do you put out a RFP for an AI product, right? Like what do you do about things like version locking, etc., etc.? Because the product is evolving itself.
And also when you ask for the experience, they'll have to tell you exactly what they've done before that.
That's correct, which may or may not help. So so that's the, in a nutshell, the problem between state capacity, public policy, and artificial intelligence.
Okay, at that crossroad, let us hit the legal part of it, because the honorable advocate will have to now take us through the legal. The legal
honorable is purely for the judges. Well, you all must be worried, right? That I'm going to bore you all with all the legal aspects. But before that, let me just throw out a few questions to you all also. All of you all obviously use social media. How many of you all really thought in your head that you were a data set when you were on your Facebook account? Anybody? Did you all think, oh wow, was that just stretching, or did you raise your hand? Perfect. One person knew he was a data set. How many of you all think that you're contributing to facial recognition technology when you're using your mobile phones or your social media platforms? Well, facial recognition got more hits than data sets. So when we are talking about AI, and we are talking about the Personal Data Protection Bill in tandem. And Prakar gave me the perfect segue to move into this aspect about the use of postal codes in terms of identifying a data set, etc. I'm just going to give you some stories. I'm just here to share stories with you all. Now, one very interesting story I came across was about the Turkish language, which does not have a delineator between the male and female pronoun. So when you feed it data about she is a doctor and he is a nurse, it translates it where you do not know whether the doctor and nurse are male or female. But when you take the same statement and you convert it, and this was done using AI, it's converted into English. So any guesses, or rather should I say no surprises there, that the AI algorithm converted this to say he is a doctor and she is a nurse. There are instances, if you Google this, you will come across, where an algorithm, if it is asked this question about the person standing next to a microwave, woman. The person standing next to a car, man. So these are just very basic gender biases which have been identified. But this is not just a small issue of a gender bias. What we are talking about is the manner in which AI evolves is primarily from the sensibilities of the creator, as in the person who's creating this artificial intelligence algorithm, and then possibly even, when we're talking about dynamic AI, even from the sensibilities of the user. So when we are talking international relations, and there were a lot of instances mentioned about China taking decisions based on algorithm-based responses. Think about the consequences of such decisions on international policies and international perspectives when, admittedly, AI algorithms are likely to give you a biased view. The reason I mentioned that it was important about the postcode, there was one study about who commits maximum defaults in loans. It was tagged basically using a postcode, saying that persons from this region are likely to commit more defaults of loans. No surprises again that it was then evolved further to believe that people, because that area contained more African American persons. So the natural progression of this AI conclusion was that African Americans are likely to default on loans more. And therefore, when a bank wants to give loans, and if it is going to use AI to decide its policies, it will refuse loans to the African American. So we had issues of gender biases. We have issues with respect to racial bias. And let's just take it one step further. We now have today, because I'm sure all of y'all would have read the news about the Chief Justice of India wanting to use more artificial intelligence in court processes. I want to put in a disclaimer here. I'm not against AI. I'm not against the use of AI. And I truly believe that we cannot eschew technology. We cannot run away from it. All of us know about Cambridge Analytica. Did any of us sign off Facebook after that? Right? So therefore, we can't run away from the use of technology. So I'm not for a moment advocating that. So with that disclaimer, let's just move forward to the use of AI in courts or in legal enforcement processes, because there is also this issue of security that was brought up in this panel discussion. Predictive policing is a reality today. We are talking about youngsters here, so let's just use a little bit of our movie knowledge, right? In fact, a lot of the purists with respect to AI believe that movies are the biggest enemies of AI. They say that it has demonized AI so much. The pink-eyed Terminator, I was going to lead with that. That was taken away from me twice, right? The first culprit is out there, Richard. So we're not just talking about the pink-eyed Terminators. Let's talk about the Minority Report in terms of predictive policing. Let's talk about a lot of other movies we have out there, including AI, which is about using protectionism. There was one instance that was raised. So I just wanted to bring in that aspect too. So if AI believes, that people who drive in cars are more likely to die than those who are living at home, and then it puts in a policy saying people should no longer drive cars, right? Because that's the outcome that I'm obviously using exaggeration to make a point here, but these are possibilities. So then, and if you look at the movie AI, that's what it talks about. How, following the 3 laws of robotics, AI starts believing that the best way to protect the human is to not allow the human to follow normal processes of being human, right? So just coming back to the point I was making about predictive policing here. US has already introduced this tool of predictive policing. It has helped in many cases, including in identifying serial killers through their common modus operandi. But it also has its flip side. All of us know that in the implementation or process of law, there are 4 stages. You have you have intention, you have preparation, then you have attempt, and then you complete the action. Intention and preparation are not in general punishable. Why am I saying not in general punishable? Because the law was very clear that you cannot punish. Just because I think, oh, this person, I just don't like. It's unfortunate Prakar is next to me, okay? I don't mean it to him. I know it's being recorded and being, shared through the world probably. I don't want such witnesses to my making statements. So again, disclaimers there. I may not like Prakar, right? I may say, okay, let me just figure out how I can throw him off this desk. I want to hurt him. I want to just make him stop talking, right? That intention is not punishable. In the process of preparation, I say, okay, let me just see if I can nudge his chair closer to the edge. Even that probably may not. It comes to a stage where the chair is nudged to the edge, and in spite of my best efforts, Prakar escapes. He doesn't fall off the edge. At that stage, I become punishable. With technology, what has happened is, even at the stage of preparation, sometimes it may become punishable. One example, hacking, right? Or a virus attack. You just install a bot, even that with the intention of committing a financial fraud could be an offense, which is why I put in that variation. But when you're talking about predictive policing, when you're talking about, and this is the next stage of predictive sentencing, then we come into the foray of human rights and fundamental rights in terms of not being judged for my gender or the color of my skin, or for what a community of people who I may belong to may have committed. Generalization and using a generalization to punish an individual. These are things which were unheard of. I hope that's not some kind of a warning bell for me, but these are unheard of in the process of legal enforcement. Today, in US, there is an AI predictive tool called Compass, which is the abbreviation, which tells you whether a person is likely to commit an offense again. And therefore, using that prediction, judges are supposed to decide what is the sentence that should be given to that person. Imagine the plight of those persons from that PIN code, which says they are more likely to commit default, or from a region or a race or community, which is already tagged as people who are more violent than the rest, right? So this is where the difficulty arises. And I will close with just 2 comments on this. One, there are already laws in various regions. Europe has been leading the fray with respect to guidelines and laws and processes, regulations rather, for artificial intelligence, as they did with data protection, which not only talk about what you should do, but also what you should not do. And primary amongst them is the law, the regulation which says that artificial intelligence should be non-discriminatory. Putting it down as a regulation or guideline is one thing, implementing it is another issue. And this is where the big gap lies today. And we are also talking about AI evolving across nations, but there is no harmony between nations when it comes to emerging technologies. So when you look at historical processes, the minute laws cross borders, the minute trade cross borders, the minute international relations mattered, there was a process which chipped in to create what we call as soft laws, which are like treaties or conventions, which say that this is how every sovereign nation will decide its internal laws. So once we sign up for a treaty, we agree to be governed by the broad contours of it, and we will formulate our internal laws based on those treaties. This is something which evolved whenever maritime trade, whenever cross-border trade, including till recently e-commerce, everything has guided the way for international laws to be harmonized. Strangely, for emerging technologies, this has not happened. There is some kind of a mental block that is out there. The second thing that I wanted to point out was the inclusive aspect. When we are talking about inclusive, we are not merely talking about individual issues. We are talking about economic issues also. We're talking, there was a very nice and small instance called Share Bump, as an example, which records when you're on if you download the app onto your mobile and you're on the road and it bumps around, then it will record it and say, okay, in this area, there are more bumps than in the other. And that is supposed to guide policy of the government to say, we need to ensure that the roads are repaired better. So the study goes on to conclude that if poor people do not have enough mobiles and they don't have enough share bumps, does it mean that the roads in their region will not get repaired?
Correct.
Right? So how do we harmonize even processes when the minute you start thinking use of AI for governance, use of AI as a public good, use of AI as a resource, public resource, use of AI in law enforcement. So when you take every single of those topics which have been given to us as a panel, and we evaluate the good versus evil as was pointed out earlier, and I agree with Utkarsh, there is no such thing as good versus evil. In fact, I have written an article on encryption on this, drawing on the Indian concept of dualism, and where we say that good and evil coexist. And it's only about where sometimes it balances in favor of one and moves to the other. Otherwise, there is no such thing as a stringent, clear-cut, you're good, I'm bad kind of delineation. So similarly, drawing on the Indian philosophy of dualism, I would say even with respect to emerging technologies, there is no concept of only good or only evil, but how do we ensure that the good prevails? How do we ensure that we benefit more and we balance out better instead of it being a trade-off? Today, what is happening is we are trading off all these biases, all these variations as the evil which we have to pay as a price for the good that it may bring. There a lot was said about China, right? They are deciding international policy, decisions based on artificial intelligence. And as Prakar in the passing mentioned, even to the extent of where they are drawing from social media posts. So what is merely because AI can give you an answer in 1 second, does it make that answer right? Do we want to create terminators across the world which will say that this is the instruction that has been fed into me, I will therefore shoot at sight, right? Where do we draw the line?
Thanks. Couple of quick things which came out of that. One is with your clear, precise definition how you would get rid of him. I never want to get on your wrong side. But just a couple of quick points before we throw to the audience. Because while we talked about the larger picture, the whole thing of AI and personal law, no one talks about. I mean, I'm making a comment here. For example, if I buy a smart TV, is it okay that that smart TV can listen to everything I'm saying? Have I approved by buying that smart TV that every conversation, and I'm not talking about Alexa, leave that aside. I'm saying a smart TV. For example, today there are apps which you are downloading, but nowhere when you download that app, do you know that every conversation that happens in your living room after that can be used for or against you, right? So things that also when you're talking about these agreements between nations and how to govern and how to formulate laws with regard to this, are we saying that because there's a treaty in place that that technology will be used the same way in North Korea as it will, for example, in Great Britain, or say in India as it will in Scandinavia? No, I mean, I'm sure we can't say that. Right?
I'm glad you brought in the personal issue aspect. Just two stories here. It's not just about TV. Would you believe that it's already a case that the Vizio TV already not only listened into people, but they were actually going by the reaction of people to every advertisement, every program. And obviously, the customers did not know they were allowing the vampire into their homes, right? So Vizio TV again got away with a 2.2 million, if I'm not mistaken, fine by US FTC.
Okay.
But does it take away from the fact that all those customers' rights were violated? Let's also take up Alexa and Google.
No,
Because recently there is an article that they have not only been listening to your most private moments in the bedroom, but also using it for they've claimed that we listened in to you because we were using it to develop the AI. So all these are clear violations, and this is what the PDP bill is expected to protect you against.
Facebook.
Okay. I've got 2 notes saying that we're
I
over time.
realize.
Okay, at the start of the day, I was very worried that you were the first panel. Now I'm very thankful because the rest now have to figure out which way what all we have said and what they have to, what course they have to chart. So can we, if it's okay with you guys, can we throw open to the audience, or if there's anything else?
I just wanted to say one thing. So, hi, can you hear me? Okay. So just on your last point, right? Like the idea is that if you give consent, your data will be used for a particular purpose. So Facebook Messenger app asks you to use your microphone, you say yes, and therefore they can do whatever they want to do with it, right? The regulation or laws around this have not evolved, but there was the AP Shah committee that came up with a bunch of principles like purpose limitation, storage limitation, and things like that, which are in play, haven't been adopted or put into a consequential purpose yet, but that's happening.
But everyone who knows the system, basically,
just one clarification because
their
I don't.
laptop camera is covered, their phone camera is covered. So there is a reason why a lot of people around us today, I mean, we're calling them cuckoo, but they sort of have a lead on us.
But legally, you cannot sustain an unconscionable contract merely because I've consented to it. Just wanted to put in that clarification.
Just one quick question, if I could throw, is that if I were to create an artificial intelligence program based on the information you, as my participants and my co-creators, share with me, which will help you fight against terrorism, how many of you would think that that's a good thing? By a show of hands, if I can give you an artificial intelligence program which can combat terrorism against any terror attack in India, how many of you think would be a good thing? I guess quite a few of you. No. All the people who have raised their hands, all the information that you give me to make this artificial intelligence program to fight terrorism has a very key critical component that the information you have given me, using that I need to control your behavior to fight against terrorism. So I will now tell you what you can eat, where you can go, what time you can go out, what clothes you can wear, what public services you can use. Now, how many of you think you will be ready to share that information with me for battling terrorism? 2 people. So 2 people still would be very happy because they are so afraid of terrorism, they rather give up their personal rights, even though the Supreme Court has ruled that privacy is a fundamental right. So in a way, they are now ready not to accept the Constitution, ready not to accept the Supreme Court because they are so afraid of terrorism. So this is the complexity of AI that we are dealing with. Always, whatever you hear us speak about, start thinking that if somebody is asking you for something, what will be the end result? And is it in keeping with what the Constitution has given you, which is your fundamental rights? And how far are you ready to give up those fundamental rights just because you thought there will be a certain efficiency that will come into the system? Usually you will find that somebody did not do a job well, therefore they come up with these excuses and say, give us more, give us more, give us more, and we'll make it, etc.
Okay.
So
okay. On that note, thanks. Very valid point. And I hope you understand all the various points that he made with that last point. Okay, questions, anyone? We have time for 2 quick questions. The mic. Let's go all the way to the back. There's someone at the back. All the way at the back. There also. Take it easy.
Yeah.
Under control.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell us your name? Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Sakshi, and
Hi.
I am doing MSc Industrial Mathematics in Ferguson College.
Wow. Okay.
Currently, I am doing internship at Emerson.
Can you hold it closer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question with Utkarsh. So you were talking that we have to think globally, right? In order to solve. And I have a question that we have to, what are the different steps we have to do in order to develop with the AI so that it will not affect the employment opportunities for less educated people? Because they are, in India, there are many people who don't have money for their food even. So how they can manage for the education? So if we are making machines like artificial intelligence, we are making machines intelligent so that they will be able to take the decisions, right? And if after developing some algorithms and all these things, if machines will be able to take all the decisions, then surely the employment will be less for the less educated people. So what do you want to add in this? How we will help
Okay,
that?
if I can just paraphrase, basically, it's.
I got a question.
Yeah, okay, yeah, go ahead.
First of all, is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. Great question. Thankfully, somebody is thinking about AI in education. Look, first step, when anyone talks about AI, you flip it as IA, intelligence augmented. So this entire pursuit of AI and all of these buzzwords when they get thrown around is a way to augment your own intelligence. How can we as a community, how can we as people augment our intelligence to make the economic, social, and political outcome better and more equitable? I felt your question was about inclusion. How do disempowered communities make AI or IA work for them? And it's really important to look at, say, how has organization like Khan Academy, or how has video-based platforms, how are they making education, knowledge in a way free? So we live in a world where knowledge is available free, but there are two things that are missing. How do you transform that knowledge into practical insight or wisdom? And how do you essentially motivate people to unlearn and relearn multiple times? That is the single hardest skill that is not taught in schools or colleges today. How do you reinvent yourself? Where did you say your internship was?
Emerson Electrical Company.
Yeah, so if you look at your particular company, yourself, you'll have to repivot multiple times in your career. I studied engineering, then liberal arts, then an MBA, and now I'm heading as a Shrievening Fellow. So I've had 4 pivots in my 29, 30 years of age. So you'll have to do that. But imagine a 50-year-old truck driver who loses his job to an autonomous car. You ask him or her to reskill himself or herself as, say, a coder or a data scientist. It's easier said than done. So how do you equip people, both disenfranchised and people who might become disenfranchised, to embrace education? And I think all begins with the community. All of us need, with this AI revolution, need to belong or create micro communities which can, augment our intelligence both as individuals and as a group. And I feel that there are some practical examples that all of you should actually. There's a freely available course on AI called AI for Everyone. It doesn't need a technical background. It's freely available. Please sign up and just read up for it. A lot of the debates that have been mentioned today are discussed there. And I feel we live in a time where each of us needs to have a base level understanding of how technology affects our job. Please do that. INSEAD Business School and Microsoft have joined to create another course on AI. You guys should try that out as well. But these micro steps.
You are talking about AI for everyone. Where is that course available?
Sorry?
You are talking about AI for everyone. So where is that course available?
It's on Coursera.
Coursera.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
One last question. Where's my, over there. Sorry.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Karthik. I'm from
Can you hold it closer, please?
Yeah. I'm Dr. Karthik. I'm from MIT. I'm doing my international master's in disaster management. So I'm basically from like a medical field. So I just want to have something with health. Like olden days, we used to have our food like sitting in the floor. Okay, so we are healthy. Then the thing changed. We got a dining table. So now nobody is sitting there. So it's very difficult to sit in the floor, right? So after that, the dining table replaced the traditional way. Then the next thing, everything is changing, right? everything is changing. Like now, sir told about automation. Like making, like using a smartphone, you can operate the TV, light, everything. So it's no need of walking. Like sitting one place, you can do all the things. The next thing is, olden days we used to use the stairs, then lift replaced.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting a lot of dirty looks. Can you get to the question, please? Sorry, we need to wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like olden days we used to use the stairs.
Okay.
Then the lift replaced.
Yeah.
So now AI is replacing everything. So what about the thinking? How the people, because of the replacement of AI, what about the human thinking?
Second. Okay.
So sorry, just your question was how is AI applicable in healthcare? Is that right?
Yeah, healthcare.
Okay, let me.
See,
Okay.
Just think about that.
Sure.
Now
I
we
have some
thinking
examples
about-
which I'm happy
For
to share.
example,
Yeah.
sorry if I can. You might have a machine, right?
Yeah.
Do the most impossible operation, do it perfectly, right? But when the person comes out, you will still need a nurse, right, to take care of him for post-operative care. You cannot automate that. That is one part of the argument, right? The next part of the argument, if you want to quickly,
Just tell me about the human thinking.
Okay.
See, the world,
I can
like
take that.
There is a
Albert
question.
Einstein told, the world is
I
formed
can close it.
by
Okay.
our own thinking, right?
So fine.
I actually will just like there are many AI applications in healthcare in prediction and figuring out. And I think what Nivedis mentioned is really important aspect. There are some aspects of medical science which are hard to automate. Like in the future, if you look at the World Economic Forum report, 100% right. Nursing, care, these things are hard to automate. So all of you should figure out what kind of jobs are ripe for automation and what of them would be hard. In a nutshell, they call it Moravec's paradox, which is the things that machines are great at, humans tend to be really bad at. And the things that humans are great at, machines tend to be really bad at today.
And we're going to hope it stays
We
that
will
way
also hope that it stays.
while we wrap this panel up. Thank you all very much. Thanks. Thank you. We've been we're around. You can talk to us. We're here. We're here for the rest.
We can take that during the further time when the guests are here.
I understand because of the positive the time, we need to take the next panel as of now. You definitely can interact with all the panel members at the time of the lunch. We all are having lunch together. Request the panel members to be here just to express our token of love towards the expertise which you definitely have given to the audience.
I request Dr. S.S. Haridas, Associate Director, MIT SOG, to first felicitate Ms. N.S. Napinai. Please have a huge round of applause. Next, it is Mr. Prakhar Mishra. I request ma'am to felicitate Mr. Prakhar Mishra as well. I request ma'am to felicitate Mr. Prakhar Mishra, Associate of IDFC Institute.
No, it's fine. I'm also fine.
I now request ma'am to felicitate Mr. Saikar Datta.
That's the color he's most happy to see. I told you I'm throwing Prakhar under the bus. He got suffering.
Yeah, I gain legitimacy with the
See, he got the cute thing. We should take it home. No.
Now I request ma'am to felicitate Mr. Utkarsh Amitabh. Let us have a huge round of applause, please. Last but not the least, for moderating well this session, I request ma'am to felicitate Mr. Nivedi Talwar. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all. I request all of you to be kindly seated in the front row so that we can start off with the second panel. Yes. The second panel will be on the topic skilling in the age of AI. And let me invite all the panel members over to the dais. Mr. Argo Ganguly, founder and CEO of AG Analytics. Let us welcome him with a huge round of applause, please. Let me next invite Mr. Sanjay Podar, MD of Accenture Lab, over to the dais. Let me also invite Mr. Jagdish Mitra, Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer of Tech Mahindra, over to the dais. And Ms. Vaishali Neotia, co-founder and CEO of Merxius Software, over to the dais for the panel discussion. Last but not the least, the moderator of this session is Mr. Samar Ubrai, Strategic Advisor of X Billion Labs. Welcome, sir. There is a small announcement before we begin this session. This session will be from 12:45 to 1:30. For the moderator's notice, please, sir. And then we'll have a lunch break from 1:30 to 2:15. Please be back here exactly at 2:15. And then we'll have two more sessions from 2:15 to 3:15 and 3:15 to 4:15 respectively. Then we'll move on to the valedictory function. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Hello. Hello. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So good afternoon, guys. I think this panel is going to be tremendously relevant given what the panel right before discussed. And I think that's what most of the people in the audience are quite inquisitive about as well, which is the future of AI from a skilling and a jobs and an employment point of view. And it's amazing that we have such an esteemed set of panelists here who definitely, their insights and their opinions would definitely be tremendously helpful if you guys listen carefully and actually implement some of the stuff that they're going to talk about. So welcome, guys, and lady. I'm not at all sexist in any form. There's a whole bunch of stuff for us to cover, and I think we're a bit limited on time. So let's try to sort of get as much ground going. So I think the best way for us to do this is if you go around the panel doing a short introduction of what your respective organizations are doing. Also, because each of your organizations are doing something very well, of course, in the larger AI and data science and computer science space, there's uniqueness between each of the organizations as well. And so to cover a bit on what your respective organizations are doing, but also if you can touch upon why are we even here in the first place talking about AI from a skilling perspective? What is being disruptive? What is being disrupted and what's really about to come in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? If you can combine both of those together, that'll be tremendously helpful. So we can start just from a left to right point of view, and then we can just go to second questions after that.
Okay, so ladies first, huh? Well, thank you. A very happy afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry that you guys are being kept from lunch, but we'll wrap this up quickly, I'm sure. And this should be relevant. So I am Vaishali Neotia, and I run a company called Merxius. We have a software called Red, which is essentially an AI-enabled skills training platform, which helps you create, distribute, and consume data. And one of the interesting things about what Red does is it can output not just to 2D, 3D formats, but also extended reality formats. So whatever you get, the data that you get out of Red can be seen in a virtual reality headset. It can be seen on an iPad in augmented reality. You can see it on a HoloLens in mixed reality, so you can learn that way also. So just to take up a little bit on what we heard about why we're here and why skilling is relevant with the context of AI. So let me just quickly talk about the general thoughts around or the schools of thought around AI. Right, most of you must be aware there are basically two schools of thought in everything. There's the utopian philosophy and there's a dystopian one. Utopian is where everything is la la land and everything is amazing and AI will change the world and technology is going to make everybody's lives better and all of that. And dystopian, of course, is everybody saying that machines will take over. It's going to be like the Matrix, and none of us have Keanu Reeves skills to even handle the machines. So we're all just we're screwed. Pardon the language. So and that's essentially what we can divide everything associated with with AI. Into these two schools of thought. Of course, under that you'll have people who are realists, you'll have optimists, you'll have people who are saying, okay, at the end of the day, technology is a tool. So you figure out what you can do with it and whether you use it positively or negatively is coming from the human itself. For example, the atomic bomb, right? Atomic energy could be used in many ways, but somebody realized that, hey, I can use it to destroy an entire country. And that's how that happened. So in my opinion, if you just look at artificial intelligence, right, even the definition itself, it clearly talks about, from the human perspective, if you look at us, we have two parts of the brain. We're all aware of the left brain, right brain concept. And in fact, if you guys haven't already, you should watch this TED Talk by Jill Bolte Taylor on the difference between the left and the right brain. Beautiful TED Talk. It's called My Stroke of Insight. So for me, all of AI and everything that we are doing with artificial intelligence today is restricted to the left brain. We've not even begun touching the right brain. And so this whole concept, the dystopian philosophy around AI will take over humans, for me doesn't make sense because the human mind, the intelligence that we have is not just left brain oriented. It's not just mathematical and logical. It's much more beyond that. And there's a distinction between intelligence and being sentient. How many of you have seen this movie called The Time Machine, which was based on H.G. Wells' book by the same name? One person. Okay, so you won't get the reference. But there is this sentient librarian in that movie, it's holographic display and probably a future version of what all of us imagine Siri or Alexa to be at some point. But really, that's millennia away. With the tech we have today, with what we are trying to do, it's still left brain. We do not have sentience. Even the concept of robots today is purely logical, mathematical decisions, and all the decision-making trees that we have under machine learning. It's all still rooted in the left brain. So yeah, I think as far as I'm concerned, and the reason that I'm working with RED, which is AI powered, is essentially to make human lives better. So I'm more the tech optimist here, looking at using AI to enhance human skills, to skill and upskill them, with the rise of the terminology of gold collar workers, where you combine blue collars and white collar workers together, right? So blue collar workers using technology can actually become skilled enough to be able to also do white collar jobs. That's something that's possible today with the use of technology, with the use of AI. And that's essentially what AI can really do for skilling. Thank you.
Thanks, Roshali. Sanjay.
Are you able to hear me? No? Are you able to hear me now? Okay. Okay, so probably one thing about me is I lead the labs in Accenture where we do a lot of applied research on how all these new age technologies that we hear about, whether it's AI, quantum, digital ledgers, augmented reality, how will it change businesses and the society? So my day job is to lead a bunch of researchers. Most of them are PhDs, and we work on real life use cases. In India alone, we have successfully used AI in preventing human trafficking, in financial inclusion in villages, in the area of, with a lot of folks like Wildlife Conservation Society. We are detecting, with the help of AI, presence of vulnerable species in Kaziranga and in the ocean depth. Internet of Bird, if you have an app in your Android phones, is something from my lab which can identify any bird species of India. So we wanted to make AI real, working with National Association for the Blind to create classes powered by AI for helping them in their professions. We are helping hearing impaired children dance to music with help of AI in the bands, in the wearables. So one of the thing I like to do is focus on the positive aspect. In fact, this week I got my 20th patent granted in AI in the US. So one thing I always want to do, and I run a program called Tech for Good in Accenture Labs, is while the whole world debates, rightfully so, on aspects like GDPR, data privacy, ethics, which is very important, we also don't lose sight of the power of AI. What AI can do for you and how it can change or help us both reimagine the problem and come up with new kind of solutions. Right now, we just did a successful pilot in some engineering colleges in India with NASSCOM's Future Skills program to help create adaptive and affordable learning paths. Because I think probably Utkarsh mentioned about the need for relearning, and it's very important you have very, some of these new technologies or skills, they have a steep learning curve. So how do you create very personalized learning paths for people so that they can learn faster? So a lot of interesting things happening in the lab. Overall, my firm, Accenture, we are 500,000 strong worldwide. And across all industry, we are seeing a very healthy adoption for AI. So we also therefore think it's important for us to do AI the right way. We are one of the big champions of data privacy, inclusive and responsible AI, and things like that as well.
Thank you. We're going to actually come back to a lot of the points that you guys are mentioning as well, and then I guess after the first round of introductions. So yes, Jagdish.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jagdish Mitra. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Tech Mahindra. And as most of my co-panelists and the previous ones as well talked about, don't think we need to define AI, but it has probably a very far-reaching impact on everything that we do. And I think the question that we should ask is, what does skilling in AI mean? I mean, what is the skill that you need to develop for AI? And I think the way we in TechM have kind of done, and my role in NASSCOM as a part of their executive council, is to make sure that people are recognizing the need for skilling, first of all, and then there are resources that are available that will allow you to skill. But let me tell you, this is all in the context of technology guys, software guys, people who are, in jobs and so on and so forth. But the skilling for AI, I think, is way beyond what we are talking about and what we are looking at here in this room for students, aspiring people who are looking for jobs. Because as someone said, and I don't think we want to debate it, but someone said, artificial intelligence is the last thing that man invented. So if that's that profound and possibly that important, then it will change the way we live forever. And that's probably true for therefore skilling every aspect of our society. Whether it's someone took an example of a truck driver and said that, what happens if autonomous cars take their jobs away? And I think the very instant of that example is that, Uber has already done autonomous car pickups for cabs in Philadelphia. And Uber's challenging London taxi cabs, who were probably the biggest, they were the first mental repository of the whole London map. But if you see what intelligence or Uber did was to take away something that was easily mapped. But they will also be the ones who will first lose the jobs when autonomous cars come to play. But the guys who are London cabbies have an inherent skill in memory and in mapping and knowing pictorial representations that can be used in a tremendous set of jobs beyond cabs. So I just want to make sure that we leave you with the thought that we have this debate of saying, what will AI do? Will it take jobs away? Will it create jobs? If you have to believe one of the research, no one knows, but the recent event going on in Davos for World Economic Forum says 75 million jobs will go away. About 130 odd million jobs will be created. I don't know who sits down and calculates these numbers, but somewhere in that range gives you a sense that there will be many more jobs that will get created. But the taxi example is to give you a sense of the kind of jobs that will get created. So what you're doing today will probably go away, but if you don't skill yourself for the future in a completely different area, leveraging AI, then you don't have a job. So you have to decide whether you have to be on the 75 million or 135 million. And that's my message.
Oh, thanks. We're actually going to go a lot more deeper into those and your personal and your thoughts and opinions on designations of the future and stuff that sounds absolutely sci-fi today, but it's very realistic. Things we'll get into that for sure. But thank you.
Am I audible? Is there an echo here, or is this one good enough? Maybe?
No, this
one is not working.
Yeah, try the comments.
Okay. Okay. Huh?
It's working.
It's working. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Orko Ganguly. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a statistician by training and have about 2 decades of experience in the industry, having worked for Accenture, some of the big 4, big 5 firms. I developed the Civil TransUnion score in 2011, which is currently the de facto credit score in India. The main objective that I have talking here is I personally believe, after all my experiences in these corporates, that AI is not a very well understood term. I mean, a lot of people do understand, but that lack of understanding persists in the universities, in the corporates, and that is kind of hampering our development of AI resources. And India is not really doing great in this regard. I mean, if you look at our journey from with respect to economy, I mean, our $3 trillion economy mainly rests on this $135 of ITITS exports. And thanks, Jagdish, for mentioning many of the points which I would have liked to. I mean, we have to skill ourselves better. I mean, we means we as citizens of the world. I mean, if it is like we cannot do it as Indians, then somebody else is going to do it, and we are going to lose our edge. That 135 billion, if that tinkers, we are in trouble. So I think there are other things to discuss, and I think I would let you carry on, and I'll talk later on this.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so jumping straight into it, and so we're going to keep this open-ended. So I'm not going to necessarily direct this towards any individual. Whoever feels most relevant to add their thoughts on this. So let's actually get started to the heart of the topic itself. And I think that Jagdish, you touched upon this, but anyone can take this. Okay, so prospective employees who they've not entered the job market yet. I mean, that's the audience that we have here. They've not entered the job market yet. And so how do you do job prediction? When somebody's looking at, okay, I want to build my career, like back in the day, say, I study XYZ for the first X years of my life, and then I'm going to spend the Y years of my life developing and honing my skills further, but in that career, which is, of course, exactly that's up for disruption. So today, when somebody's in 2020 looking at, okay, I want to get into X by in the next 2 to 3 years, how do you even go about imagining or understanding that? How would someone come to the conclusion that a truck driver's job probably is right up there in the percentage of probability of getting automated, versus maybe theoretical physics might be somewhere down the curve, or registered nurses and caregivers, for example, right? So how do you make that? How does it slice? What is the mechanism to understand it? Is it just repeatability and lack of creative areas? Is it a left brain, right brain element? Or is it just that some things are more predictable and therefore machines can do them better, but some things where innovation is required, man still has a chance in the next decade or so? So how does somebody look at job market in that sense and jobs to be created?
Okay. I think one way to look at it is irrespective of what profession you are in. AI is going to amplify you. Okay. We should not be paranoid that we will not have a job. So far, what machines don't have and humans have is that we have need. You know, if you have studied the Maslow's need hierarchy, there is no way our need gets fulfilled. If the need gets fulfilled today, we at the same time generate a new set of needs which are at a higher level in the value chain. So what's going to really happen across profession, any profession, is AI will amplify you. But it will come at a price. When it amplifies you, the value you add in your job will go up. But at the same time, you have to master new skills. You will have to, for example, master the skill of working with the AI. How do you leverage the AI? In fact, many of us discussed about data because AI relies a lot on insights from the data? How do you train the AI? We often say in large organizations like mine, we already use so many bots and AIs. So if you're a training manager, you have to now start thinking about how do you have a training plan for your AI so that they don't fall behind. And I think somebody made the joke about a cartoon character, why they're using bows and arrows, right? You don't want the AI to be behind. So how do you train them? You will have challenges around how do you explain the action of AI. If you're an insurance agent who's taking the help of AI to figure out the right plans for your customer, it's not enough to tell that AI has suggested this plan for you. You will, as humans, we get the responsibility to explain. So while AI will amplify us, we'll have to train them, we'll have to explain their actions, and this is not going to be a one-on-one relationship. Your complex work processes will be a collective intelligence of bunch of bots and human beings. So how the new world of work will look like will evolve. So I, for one, am very optimistic. I think Jagdish also mentioned that AI is actually going to create new kind of jobs. I think most of us are right now in jobs which we didn't know of when we were students, like all of you in the auditorium. But we quickly learned, unlearned, and picked up the new skill. The same thing is going to happen to you, but probably you will have AI to help you. At the same time, the pace of change is going to be much higher for you. So that's my perspective in this regard.
Okay, so Sanwar, just to understand your question, you basically are asking all of these guys sitting here if they have to think of a future career to get into, what skills should they be picking up on based on whether their jobs will be there a few years later or not. Well, in my humble opinion, that's not even how you should be doing it. You should basically, be looking at things that you are actually interested in rather than what jobs will be there or what's going to pay you the most. But in my humble opinion. But if we just have to figure out, the job distribution between, and like everybody here has been mentioning that AI will create jobs or help create jobs and opportunities. I talked about, the rise of gold collar workers, where you can actually skill or upskill to be at that level. Because of the use of tools in AI. One of the things that I could, I would like to touch upon is maybe the concept of safety. So there are a lot of jobs even today which have been, which don't need human involvement or interaction. They could be difficult jobs, they could be unsafe jobs. For example, this is something all of you might relate to, right? These glass cleaners you often see on skyscrapers. They're on, they're outside the 42nd floor on this building, and somebody's cleaning the glass, and I'm inside, and I'm just like, I can't even look outside because I have so much acrophobia, and there's somebody actually there with just some sort of flimsy harness, and he's cleaning the glass window. Now, ideally, I would like a bot to replace that human being, because what if that's somebody I know? That's a very dangerous job, right? Or other things, for example, in mining or in the oil and gas industry, where environments may not be very safe. We would want robots or robotic arms to replace humans. Places which are accident prone, places where human lives are in danger. Also certain things which are just plain inconvenient, like for example, finding items in a huge warehouse. Some of the, like the Amazons of the world, they have huge warehouses. We can just imagine how big their warehouses are. When we order for like one pen, they send it in this big carton. That's their idea of scale, right? So you just think about what their warehouse sizes are. If you have to search for items in that warehouse, sending a human to do that it's not only inconvenient, but it could take a long time. This could be, of course, made more efficient and optimized if you have, and of course, there are a lot of companies, Walmart, for example, is already doing it, where they have robotic arms which are able to identify and procure items based on what aisle or what category they've been assigned to. And so certain jobs which we understand are, one thing you mentioned, mechanical, are, don't, or could be unsafe, or are just inconvenient. They definitely are the kind of things that we know humans may not be needed for or can be replaced. But there are, of course, still a lot of skilled jobs out there, a lot of skills that are very needful of skilled beings. In fact, one of the biggest issues in the manufacturing industry in the US, for example, is that all the baby boomers are retiring, and certain skills that they have in terms of performing certain operations, they're not being able to pass that on to the next generation. Because that's not something that can be taught via textbook. It needs to be experientially learned. And this is, in fact, where, again, technology can come into use, like extended reality technology, for example, where you can see and visualize and experience what a skilled person is doing. You can see it from his or her, her perspective, and you learn from that point of view. So, so in conjunction, if we really look at it, artificial intelligence is one technology. But even in, like the lone wolf versus the pack, when you combine it with all of these other technologies out there today, Accenture has this great concept of dark hue. When you look at the combination of, say, AI with XR, with quantum computing, there is so much synergistic effect that can happen. And all of this is aimed to make, again, in my humble opinion, human lives easier, safer, and much more efficient.
So the takeaway that I get is that people should still continue. If say there are people in the audience aspiring to be lawyers or doctors, for that matter, non-STEM profession people as well, thank God, visualizers and graphic, say UI UX professionals. So people should still continue aspiring in those professions. The only difference is the UI UX profession 2.0 or 3.0 now will be very different than today. That's the only difference. But lawyers will still be needed. Just they'll be doing a different skill set then versus what they do today. For example, a large part of a lawyer's job is research, precedence research, right? A lot of case history, etc. And so a lot of part of that probably would get automated, but the human computation would still be needed. And again, we're talking about the most short to medium term. We're not talking singularity. We're not talking 2047 and Draco as well, and not that yet, I guess. Fortunately, I guess all of us have time for that. Okay, I want to get into something else. And maybe Ariga, you can throw some light on this. What about the non-STEM people, right? I'm a non-STEM person, and I'm surprised I'm moderating a panel of this, but I'm a non-STEM person, and there might be people in the audience. There are a lot of people out there who are non-STEM. What do non-STEM people sort of then, while of course their professions will still exist, if we've established that business analysts and auditors might still be needed and consultants, their professions will get a 2.0 version of themselves. So do you recommend non-STEM individuals to at least do some basic courses in data science or play around something with TensorFlow, or you may not even need to do that altogether? Any thoughts for non-STEM individuals in specific?
Thanks for the question. Very good one. So my opinion is that non-STEM people has a big role to play everywhere. I mean, and that is one of the misunderstandings of AI that I see everywhere. I mean, I'll just give you an example. So just for your information, I mean, I do teach some AI courses in Calcutta and in other places. So I went to approach the government, like saying that, I mean, I want the Infosys and the IBMs and the Accentures to open offices not only in Pune and Mumbai, but also to places like Ratnagiri or Jalgaon or Amravati, because that is where, if we can make this talent available at a very cheap rate, I mean, then and only then our economy can grow with the cost differential. So I was talking to a bureaucrat. I didn't end up reaching the minister. So talking to the bureaucrat, and he said that if you really want to do a lot of things, I mean, you see, we hear about this AI things in newspapers. I know that it's important, but I think you should really focus on agriculture, because at the end of the day, only 4 million people in India are in ITS, and AI is like a minuscule small percent of that, and like 50% of our labor force is still in agriculture, which is like 250 million people. So if you do something on agriculture, I think that will benefit the population much more. Now, this is a typical example that bureaucrat is not supposed to write Python codes. The bureaucrat is only supposed to help me get into or facilitate me with this AI education in colleges, because I mean, unfortunately, I mean, all of you are students. I think most of the engineering syllabus ends before Napoleon came to power, right? Very few is after that. I think analog signal processing is a compulsory subject, and digital signal processing is a elective subject in most of our engineering. So this is a state of affairs. I mean, in lines with the wonderful speech by Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. So the way I divide this is that there are various stakeholders in the entire process. So first, there are students and the young employees or aspiring employees. I mean, what should they do? The next one is the employers, and the third one is the government. And everybody has a role to play in AI. And the there are a lot of things here. So I mean, let's talk about the aspiring job seekers or the aspiring employees. I mean, what should they do? I mean, if you look at the entire set of technologies, or not even technologies, the skill sets which are required in order to succeed in the AI domain. I mean, I, frankly speaking, divided into 5 different parts. And only one part is Python. So even if you don't know Python, there are various other things which you can do to facilitate it. So let's come to like the business part of it. I mean, there are lots of upcoming technologies these days, like AI, blockchain, AR, VR, cybersecurity. Now, AI has a very critical difference with all these other disciplines. I mean, all these other disciplines that we talked about, like blockchain and cybersecurity, they operate in a very focused field, at least today. I mean, blockchain, if you look at the entire peer-to-peer business and the way it is supposed to develop, I mean, it can eliminate literally all the middlemen. But all of us know that blockchain is a very power-hungry technology, and we don't really have that amount of infrastructure to support it. So the difference with AI, the difference of AI with all these technologies is AI is a very all-pervasive kind of thing. I mean, AI operates not only in the driverless cars, but in our own day-to-day lives, right? You can have AI in the microwave oven, and you can have AI in like the chatbots and various other things. So this business knowledge is one of the very critical things in the development of AI. An AI solution for a financial services is entirely different than the AI solution in healthcare. And an expert in one will not be able to replicate the solution in the other. So even if you're a Python programmer, you just need guidance from the industry experts. So somebody who is a marketing expert in the FMCG domain, FMCG sector in India. I mean, that person can guide you much better on what Python program needs to be written in order to replicate or like predict the behavior of the masses than probably any Python programmer can. And this is just one small example. And like there is the others being sales and marketing, technology, and the quantitative disciplines. So I mean, it's a long discourse. So I will end it here.
Got it. No, but thank you. Basically, people studying marketing or focused on non-STEM professions need not be disheartened because there is actually relevance of future teams, and maybe Sanjay or Jagdish, you can maybe throw a bit of light on it real quick. That do you already in your organizations have teams where you purposefully try to map STEM and non-STEM thinkers into teams together, because that's when the creative explosion happens for solutions and products. Is that already happening, or do you envisage that to happen going forward?
Shall I go ahead and then you can take it? So just to one point on the last one, I think for the people sitting here in the audience and on the dais, my only difference of opinion from Sanjay is that you have to be paranoid. You better be paranoid, absolutely, from a good way, that you've got to learn. Because one of the things that will change drastically is while the skills were alive, or once you learn a skill, they were alive for 30, 40 years for that skill to go away. The current prediction is it won't be more than 5 years. So that culture of learning every 5 years is better be valid, otherwise you don't have life. The second part of your question of putting creative people the right and the left brain people together, absolutely. I mean, that's how we create teams. We have an organization called a Makers Lab, which brings together a whole sort of people together, which try and experiment on new things that can be done. And it constitutes of people from humanities, liberal sciences. For example, we've got an Uber taxi driver who comes and does his programming. I just want to clear the myth that not everyone needs to learn Python. Please, this will be a very boring world if everyone learns Python and speaks in that language. As long as people understand that your job, your skill will get impacted by AI, and you better be aware of and imagine what it would look be. So what it will force all of us to do is, will force us to think. New technologies will constantly force us to think and not sit on the idle thing. एक बार engineering कर लिया, अभी 25 साल नौकरी है. That world is over. And that's true for, as I said, people on the stage and not on the stage. And that only way you can be learned is that if people can collaborate with so it's nowhere more important now than ever before that the certain importance of non-STEM skills. India, worldwide, it was always there. In India, we always looked upon saying that, oh, arts padh raha hai types. That's a horribly bad way of, slotting people in. And the maths guy is the best guy, and the arts or history guy is probably not got anywhere. But now it's soon becoming important that if you can't imagine, if you can't think of what that role will be and connect the dots, that's the power of AI, because otherwise data science can do whatever AI is telling it can, first step of it. It's the power of connecting weather to this, to that, to 6 points to bring in relative insight. And that, I think, is the power of what the right and left brain can do.
Brilliant. Okay, that's awesome. And sorry, I'm going working towards now wrapping this up. Of course, we have to hold questions from the audience as well. But quickly, if everybody can comment on how do each of you continue to keep your learning curves going as well? Because just best practices, personal recommendations. Are you more Coursera heavy? Are you YouTube heavy? Are you books heavy? Are you conferences heavy? What is your unique mix? Maybe some of it is planned, some of it is just organic. But what are each of you doing in your own respective personal journeys to keep your learning curves up and going? Because some of the best practices that should people enroll in Coursera programs more, should they do more internships and shadow programs? Just each one can have a unique, there's no correct answer, but just what is to your specific needs and wants that each of you are adopting. Do you read white papers and scientific white papers more? It just some insights from each of you would be helpful, because that's what the rest of us can start adopting as well.
Okay, I can talk about myself. My daughter is also a computer science person, so we both studied together almost on the same topics and share notes. But I think in addition to the STEM skills, and there's Coursera's of the world, and you can read reports in ResearchGate and all. I think the key thing to focus on is skills like your ability to collaborate. We call it in Accenture VQ. You're very important. The future skills, the future job will need you to collaborate with diverse people, including with non-STEM skills. So try to, I think somebody used the word earlier of, our tribal behaviors. Don't be tribal in that sense. Our ability to collaborate with the diverse ecosystem becomes critical. Our ability to build problem-solving skills become very critical. So try to build those. Then our ability to have empathy, for example, becomes very critical. Many cases I feel people lack content. They lack deep content knowledge about their topics in hand. Focus on that. When technology works, it disappears. So what I mean by that is all these new age technologies like AI, quantum, they will get so democratized that you won't have to learn TensorFlow. You just make an API call that's good enough. So don't worry about trying to learn how deep learning neural networks work. That is not what you need, right? So in general, if you are going to be an author or a scientist or a doctor or a truck driver or anybody, and just focus. I think I agree with Vaishali. Just don't think about all that. Focus on what you're passionate about. Maybe you're a conservation expert. Just focus on that, and all these technologies will change your job. Be ready to learn, unlearn, relearn, and the quality of your work will only improve. That's my thought.
Yeah. So before the other panelists answer the question that I had asked, would you also imagine that the resumes of the future, as all of y'all are hirers and employers yourself, and actively sort of recruit candidates, do you imagine resumes of the future to now evolve themselves to not necessarily only show pure work X, but also some of the elements of the skills that you, so future candidates for jobs should try to elucidate that, hey, here's examples of how I was empathetic, or here's examples of how I could collaborate with different skill sets of teams. So even resumes of the future from a pure employee's perspective have to evolve. And if some of you could touch upon some of those, how should they show those skills in when they approach jobs themselves?
I can only say yes, yes, yes.
You want to go?
So, okay, somewhat interesting question. So I think I can just combine some of the last few questions into one slot and help some of the people here declutter. Essentially, if you just look at technology as a tool to make your life easier, like my friend is, and they can learn from her in a different environment, right? Or there are painters and artists who are geotagging their paintings or their works of art, using AR. So it's not that they've done it themselves. They've created and they've collaborated with somebody else who's helped them be able to tag that particular piece of art or work in a particular location using certain technology, right? How many of you have seen Black Mirror or watch it? Have you seen the episode in the last season where Miley Cyrus gets replaced by this holographic bot who's singing, and it's called AI? Actually, that's a reality now. Recently, there are a couple of labels which released 2 albums which were entirely AI based. There was no actual person singing. The entire album was artificially, the music was created artificially. So the idea is there are a lot of these things happening around us. It doesn't matter what profession you're in, whether you're STEM, you're non-STEM. The idea is to be able to know what's happening around you, to understand what technologies exist today, which can be used. VR, for example, virtual reality has existed for decades, but it's only now coming into use because we have hardware to support it. There's more information and knowledge around it, right? And then just to sort of come back to talking about what are some of the things that people sitting here, even the resumes can start reflecting. In fact, the university that you guys are in, it's called MIT World Peace University. You're already doing a course on peace, which is very interesting, and that could be a great thing to add to your resumes, right? That we've done a course on peace and then what it involved and what you learned, and that's a great conversation starter also with your interviewer, for instance. Because if I'm interviewing you, I'd love to understand, okay, what was this about? What did you learn here? And then I would like to start thinking of, okay, how did this help you change your thought process? How would you be useful in my company in the role that I've thought of you, right? So thinking about these things, it's very important for you to be a holistic individual, not to be restricted by the bullet points in your resume, but to be able to understand how all of these go together in an entire mapped system to sort of form, like Jagdish mentioned, connecting the dots. And then be able to figure out how in all of this, using the combined idea of what you're interested in and what you can be good at, figuring out how you can be skilled and upskilled using technology as a tool.
So I think in the future, you probably will prepare resumes exactly based on the interviewer, because AI will tell you what I'm going to ask. So don't worry, you've got a very chilled life ahead. So on a serious note, I think to your point, I think we will need more people to demonstrate ability to solve problems. We are already in TechM, we're trying to do this through a model of right now in a very hackathonish way of getting people on board, saying it doesn't matter which university you came from or which degree you got, but please show me your capability to solve problems and the ability to imagine. You may not have solved it, but you failed or whatever, but you tried. So I think those are absolutely softer skills that will be valued more, because like all of us said, the APIs will take care of it. So, today Python, tomorrow Cobra, you don't know what else will happen. So the idea is that you don't focus on those for today, but you focus on certain things that are intrinsic to developing and being relevant to the world. I think that's what we should be looking at.
Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, awesome.
I'm going to use that line. That was really funny.
Yeah, so we have been talking about non-STEM. So I just have some suggestions for the STEM people and where I see the main risk is. So, just remember, AI in 2020 is very similar to computer science in 1960s, right? There were no books, no university courses. People who are experts in computer science, they were just learning it by themselves, and things were much harder then. So what my prediction is, and this is just a prediction, that the age of the generalists are going to be over very soon. You have to be specialists, focus on business. And nowadays, in the open source age, it makes you very, it is very easy for you to get access to the research papers. If you go to the websites of this Google and Amazon, they have all put everything up in the open. Pick one area of your interest. It can be driverless car, it can be whatever. Just build a specialization. So that is my suggestion.
Got it. Utkarsh in the audience actually wrote a very interesting article in the Mint talking about deep generalists, this concept of a deep generalist, and maybe during lunch we can have a conversation about it. I have to open up to the audience, I'm being forced with that. Okay, questions, guys. all ladies. You'll have thoughts, questions on skilling. Oh yeah, there, one.
A small a small notice to all those who are asking questions: be brief, be to the point, so that we can have more questions and they can answer as well on time.
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Aditya Ingre. I am studying political governance in MIT School of Government. Now, as we can see, there are countless examples of corporates supporting horrible regimes. United Fruit Shell, Rio Tinto are some of the better known. And in recent times, Cambridge Analytica. Corporates' world main motive is to maximize profits. But my question is, how moral consideration and profit maximizations are you working with?
Sorry, what was the question? He's basically talking about that corporates are incentivized for profit maximization and shareholder value maximization. Now, how does that play in with technology? Because then it technically it incentivizes corporates to use Cambridge Analytica kind of means, questionable ethics means to actually maximize the profit. But then I think responsible technology development is actually you're the best subject matter expert to sort of respond to that.
Yeah, I think the World Economic Forum is right now going on, and if you look at what is being discussed more is moving from a shareholder kind of view to a stakeholder kind of view. Increasingly, organizations, however successful they are realizing that the only competitive differentiator remaining today is trust. So because of that, they are trying to embrace a larger purpose. Now, in that way, they have to therefore broaden their thinking. And, we have seen the example you have given about Cambridge Analytica and things like that. People are learning, businesses are learning that they have to change their model, because if they want to keep their employees with them, if they want the customers to be loyal to them, and people are also seeing that things like climate change is real, right? So the whole definition of business is the only purpose of business is business for profit is going away. It is moving from profit to people and planet, the 3 Ps. So you will see this change happening, and all businesses are moving towards that. You just follow World Economic Forum right now. You will see every discourse is around this topic.
In fact, I just want to add to that and in fact say that the NYSC and a lot of public market forums are introducing ESG norms, which is basically sustainability, governance, environmental and economic norms, in the sense that now going forward in public market investors and hedge funds and private equity funds, as well as retail investors, will have started and increasingly will evaluate companies not purely on quarterly profits, but also with their ESG norms as well. It's a small start, but it's in the direction of exactly what Sanjay referred to.
Yes.
Questions?
Here.
Maybe we'll take this question and the next question. Let's hear both, and then we'll tackle them together.
Thank you. Hi, Ranjit here. I'm a technology policy researcher. The question goes that with every aspect of impactful decision now having a technology element to it, and the whole aspect of artificial intelligence augmenting that, what would be the panel's suggestions on ensuring that our state capacity is on par with taking decisions that have this technology and such related flavors to it? Skilling on the state capacity side.
So when you say state capacity, do you mean by the sheer number of workforce, like the workforce versus jobs kind of?
State capacity would be institutional, government, semi-government, those sort of. How do they augment themselves to tackle these challenges?
Right. Okay. So that's okay. We'll take that one. There was another question. Somebody had raised their hand. Yes. If you can quickly just ask our questions, so we'll take all of them together.
So my question is, does technology or advancement in AI really has to substitute jobs or any professions instead it can just uplift all the professions instead of substituting when it can just uplift all the professions?
No, thank you. And I think that is somewhat of what the panel has said, but we'll let them take that. And yes.
Hello. Ma'am talked about the right brain. So I'm a researcher in quantum neural networks. Can you tell me that is it is the quantum artificial intelligence helping in somewhat achieving the right brain functions?
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. So there's a question on right brain and creative areas. I'd imagine there's a question on uplifting jobs versus replacing jobs, and then there's a question on government and institutional sort of policymakers adopting AI for their decision making and automation as well, right? So we try to sort of club up some of them together. So maybe you can go on the right brain one. I think the second question has somewhat been answered. I'll just quickly summarize. I think what the entire, and in fact, that's my question to them as well, by the way. I was scared that I may be jobless, but that's not the case. It seems clearly that even an anthropologist is needed in the future. Yes, the difference is that anthropologists in the future will be doing things differently than what they do today. Same for architects, same for lawyers, etc. It's not a replacement. It's just it's a 2.0 version of the same jobs that exist today. The key is on the balls in the anthropologist's court to be able to leverage the technologies around them so that they can do their job much better. But it's not a replacement. So that's the second question, at least hopefully answered. But the first and the third we'll be able to tackle. So he asked that. So correct me if I answer your question differently. With quantum AI, would there still be a need for right brain work?
If you don't mind. Okay, I'll just give you some perspective. You're able to hear me? Okay. I'll give you some perspective of what we are doing, at least in the labs today. And we know a lot of people think that the right brain is not where AI will disrupt us, creativity and things like that. But actually, that is not really true, because some of the techniques like generative adversarial networks and all are being used. We are being experimenting with all that. You heard sometime back generating music, for example, generating art. One of the work we have done for a client is fashion designing. Earlier, we humans think only we are fashion designers, but how do you design apparels which will sell, right? A lot of the goods we purchase, we also purchase because we like the packaging. Sometimes we just change the design of the packaging and it sells like hotcakes, right? So all these technologies will make inroads in the area of creativity, design, as well over a period of time. Again, is that a bad news for us? I don't think so, because it just allows you to get even more creative with the help of all this technology. Yeah. And maybe on the other question, one quick point, there is a World Government Summit that happens every year in Dubai. They have a whole track on technology in government, okay? In fact, I authored a paper last year in Dubai on the same topic, RegTech in government. So if you can just go through that, you will see how, even in countries like India, about the adoption of technology, Digital India, for example, how you're doing the last mile with technology, the Jandhan Aadhaar mobility jam framework and all that, right? There's a lot of technology helping government to, including AI, to serve the population.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll just take up a couple of the questions there. So around the government policy thing, an example that I was just thinking of, while Sanjay was talking is the Mudra scheme, right? We've all heard of the Mudra scheme and its introduction, and there was a lot of talk around, how it's not working and the money isn't being given back to the system and all of that. If you actually look at data, all of the women who were, enabled by the Mudra scheme, I think there was a statistic where almost 90% of them have returned the money with returns, with interest. And in fact, the non-performing assets have actually been on the other side. A lot of the men or traditional borrowers who have not been able to return. So, if we just look at AI here as an example, if there was the data collation in terms of being able to analyze the kinds of people who were given loans, say, for example, under the Mudra scheme, and then the kinds of people who returned it over what period of time and the kind of business that they did, if all of that was collated and there were algorithms built around being able to figure out, okay, what are the assets which can actually be performing and will not come under NPA. So loan sanctioning would become a much cleaner process where information that's being fed into the system without bureaucrats sort of coming into the middle or the bribery or whatever system there is today. it could just in a very black and white manner be able to figure out who will return the money, who won't. And whether it's and again, with all the information given in, whether it's gender, whether it's a kind of business, whether it's the period of time, whatever it is, the money required. But AI, for example, in this case, could really help small and medium businesses start getting the loans that they deserve and need. There's so many startups today in the country. There's so many businesses. In fact, there's a lot of talk around how if if we are able to equalize employment between men and women, and we're able to increase the number of women who have their own companies in the country, we will be able to increase our global our GDP, our economy by about 60% over the next 5-6 years. And so this is a great example of where AI can be used to make policy changes around loan schemes and how to be able to help small and medium businesses. And the other thing around the right brain logic, of course Sanjay answered it, but my quick take on this is there is a lot of research, you're a researcher yourself, that is going on around being able to tap into the human brain, right? There's so much that we don't understand. We've only started touching the conscious brain. There's so much in the subconscious that we don't even know, and a lot of ways to access it are controversial, are not scientific, are in other realms, and we're just now starting to sort of collate these. And there are certain scientists and researchers, John Hopkins is there, who are starting to use alternative methods and techniques to be able to study the brain. In fact, now they're considering being able to use certain DMT-based drugs to be able to do therapy for patients. So it's just that we're just starting to get into this whole space. And like Sanjay mentioned, there's a lot that is already happening, a lot that will happen. And we can't predict what things are going to be like. But at the end of the day, again, being the tech optimist here, I would say that AI is just going to help. It's not going to replace the human brain, at least for the next millennia. I still stick by that. The more we understand of the human brain, the more we can use and utilize AI to be able to make our lives easier. And so whether it's left brain right now, whether it's getting into the right brain, but I don't see a point where all of the human brain can ever actually be replaced, because we've not even understood it yet. And there's a long time before we will. And so the fear quotient, at least for me, is not there. But yeah, I think that's really where the future is.
Just one small comment to Vaishali. So everything is fine, but all the things that you've talked about, credit risk, you're going to run into trouble with Regulation B. We will talk about it in lunch.
Okay. So thank you all. We are winding up this session. Before we wind up, thank you all. And I request Mr. Paul Carter, Deputy Head of Mission of British Deputy High Commission, Mumbai, to come over to the stage to felicitate our esteemed panel members as well as the moderator. First, I request Mr. Paul to felicitate Mr. Argu Ganguly, founder and CEO of AJ Analytics. Let us have a huge round of applause. Next, I request Mr. Paul Carter to felicitate Mr. Jagdish Mitra, Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer of Tech Mahindra. The clapping should go on, please. We had a very fruitful session. I now request Mr. Paul Carter to felicitate Mr. Sanjay Podar, MD of Accenture Lab. Kudos to the only women power in the panel. And I request Mr. Paul Carter to felicitate Ms. Vaishali Nyotia, co-founder and CEO of Mercius Software. Last but not the least, for well moderating and almost sticking to the time limit, let us felicitate our moderator. I request Mr. Paul Carter to felicitate Mr. Savar Oberoi, Strategic Advisor of X Billion Labs. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all for taking out time and having a such fruitful session. Now, we break for lunch here at this point of time, and we are supposed to assemble back at exactly at 2:10 so that we can start our session at 2:15. We'll have two sessions from 2:15 to 3:15 and 3:15 to 4:15. Then we'll have our valedictory session. All the delegates, we have our